Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Thank you, Dennis. You'd think I'd be able to project in this small room. I do the best I can. So, how are we all doing this morning? Thank you so much for coming out on this rainy day. I promise the flowers are coming. This campus is going to be exploding soon, so I just really appreciate everybody coming out when the weather's not cooperating with us. So thank you for joining us for our Community Impact Day focused on affordable housing this morning. Welcome, students. Thank you for coming. Alumni, Bruce, I think we've got other folks coming in the room, and special guests, and our esteemed speakers today. So thank you all for coming. Professional development programs like today's program are a differentiator for us. Our students and alumni have all cited that professional development programming is one of the significant reasons for choosing the Richmond MBA, so we love being able to offer these kind of programs. We all desire to be influential leaders and at work and in our communities, and we want to be inspirational. So the Richmond Promise, you're all familiar with, states that the University of Richmond has a long and proud history of community engagement, much of it at the grassroots level, that has had a transformative impact on our students and the community. Let's all take what we learned today to keep moving that engagement for the university forward. Students, your coursework, getting to know your student colleagues, exposure to outside thought leaders like you'll have this morning, exposure to alumni, networks in the RVA community, and professional development events are all part of your leadership journey. Part of leading and being a productive citizen for your community means being informed on the issues of the day, which is why we're here, and knowing yourself and understanding how you want to be involved and spend your energies. Maybe you'll learn today that helping to create a society where housing is affordable for all could be your calling. Wouldn't that be great? Now I'm going to introduce our speakers. We're starting out with welcome, and then John Martin is going to do a session on traits of a winning region, followed by Sherry Armstrong, give us a talk, and then Jovan going to take over, and then we'll have the panel after lunch. And I know Jovan has something that he'll be sharing that he wants us to talk about during our lunchtime. So let me start with our speakers. John Martin, you're familiar with John, all who came to our leadership day, is a futurist. I just love saying you're a futurist. Award-winning author and the president and CEO of RVA 757 Connects. When John is not advancing the Richmond-Hampton Roads mega region, he's leading SIR, a Richmond-based strategic consultancy. Founded in 1964, SIR has orchestrated over 16,000 strategic initiatives supporting corporations, governments, agencies, universities, nonprofits, and even entire communities. John co-authored the award-winning business book Boomer Consumer, which is subsequently named the top 10 business book by Forbes, a Bill Gates company. He earned his MBA from Virginia Commonwealth University and a BA in economics with studio art from Washington and Lee University. He currently serves as RVA 757 Connects Speedmore and Collegiate School Boards. Sherry Armstrong has led the Community Foundation, which is how we all started with this event. I called the Community Foundation, found out what are the top issues that you are looking at today, and we talked about many of them and landed on affordable housing. But Sherry has led the Community Foundation since 2015. The Community Foundation for a Greater Richmond has been committed to improving the quality of life for residents in the Richmond region for over 50 years. Sherry has held executive leadership positions in the nonprofit sector, including 26 years with United Way. She serves on boards for Chamber RVA, Venture Richmond, and RVA 757 Connects. Sherry holds a bachelor's degree in public relations from West Virginia University. Go Mountaineers. Yes, I was born there. Never actually lived there, but I was born there. Jovan Burton is the executive director of the Partnership for Housing Affordability and a nonprofit focused on creating greater access to housing opportunities. Jovan works with local governments, developers, community groups, and critical stakeholders in this role to advance housing policy and educate decision makers on the region's needs. Javon also launched and helped direct the Housing Resource Line. This phone-based program serves over 7,000 residents annually and is currently administrating the PDC Housing Program grant for Richmond, which has allocated $3 million to help produce 270 affordable housing units over the next 3 years. Javon is a graduate of Hampton-Sydney College. I think he went to school with some of our students, with a bachelor's degree in government and foreign affairs and a master's degree in public administration from the Douglas L. Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs at VCU. Laura Lafayette is the Chief Executive Officer of the Richmond Association of Realtors and the Central Virginia Regional Multiple Listing Service, two organizations serving over 4,700 realtors in the Central Virginia area. In addition, she serves as the Executive Director of the Partnership for Housing Affordability, a nonprofit dedicated to ensuring that an adequate and diverse supply of affordable housing is a public policy priority in Central Virginia. She serves on the board of the statewide nonprofit Housing Forward Virginia, sits on the board of Homeward, and serves as chair of the Better Housing Coalition. Laura received her BA in religion from William & Mary and pursued postgraduate work at Yale Divinity School and the University of Virginia. She lives here with her 3 children in Henrico, Virginia. And then Greta Harris joined the Better Housing Coalition in August of 2013 as president and CEO. Working with the stellar BHC leadership team, her strategic and fiscal leadership has been transformative. Greta was elected to the boards of the Greater Washington Partnership in 2022 and the Markel Corporation in 2021, and appointed to the Virginia Tech University Board of Visitors in 2016. She also serves on the boards of Chamber RVA, the Partnership for Housing Affordability, the Housing Partnership Network, and the Richmond Jazz Society. She co-chairs the Commonwealth of Virginia's Bipartisan Redistricting Commission. Greta was a 2023 Virginia Business Magazine Women in Leadership Award winner, among her many accolades. I was researching last night, and it's just like, I can't list all of these. There's so many, and there were so many. She earned her Bachelor of Architecture from Virginia Tech and a Master of Science in Architecture and Urban Design from Columbia University. And we are ready to go.
Great.
Thanks, John.
Thank you for having me back.
Anytime we can get you.
Okay. All right. Well, I like kicking off on a Saturday morning. And as I get older, I keep putting dates on slides back in my past. So I'm sorry about that typo, but I just tried to slow it down a little bit. But I want to share with you guys kind of the context for today. And this is my home when I'm not living about a block away from here. This is in the Fan District. It's an old bank where we have 25 people. And we do market research and strategic planning and communications plans together. And we help nonprofits, tourism entities, healthcare entities, and do a lot of work in the economic development space. It's a lot of fun because you can improve tomorrow when you're working with a lot of the smart people in that space to make a difference in communities. So we work nationally. You might recognize like the National Governors Association. And then locally, we're working actively probably in about 7 or 8 cities right now across North Carolina and Richmond, helping their city councils or their economic development agencies. It's a whole lot of fun because we really get to see the impact of programs and initiatives. It's something that's kind of interesting, and you might have heard it in my intro. We're seeing more and more innovation districts and innovation hub cities and mega regions that cross borders getting formed. And so we're actively helping Richmond and Hampton Roads become a mega region called the I-64 Innovation Corridor, and doing a lot of things there to try to help speed the economies of both regions where we can cooperate to really bring scale to some issues. And another region just emerging as a mega region is the Blue Ridge Innovation Corridor, and we're helping them. It's Danville, Martinsville, Roanoke, and Blacksburg. They're the fastest growing region in the state. And right now, they are the 4th economic engine of the Commonwealth. So they're getting organized as a cross-border cooperative. So here we are, talking about affordable housing. I'm going to start by sharing how a traditional model is what we've all been following on how regions work and how they keep score against one another. And then some trends that are disrupting this model and really trying to understand kind of where we are in that. And then our model at SIR that we help other jurisdictions with is traits of winning regions of tomorrow. And I'm going to share those real quickly, but then get to the most important traits, which gets us right to our topic today, affordable housing. So this is the context setting. So let me start 30,000 feet with this model, this idea of how regions work. Because everybody in every region wants to be thriving and they want to be growing. And I tell you, growth is your friend. If it's the other way around, you get in trouble real fast. So it starts with a growing economy. And companies expand and they create jobs. And it happens by startups growing into big companies or expanding companies locally or new companies that you attract with your economic development marketing. They come here and invest here. And so that's the beginning of the model, but you got to have a workforce to fuel growing companies. And when we work with companies, the number one thing we hear, their biggest challenge is talent, talent, and talent. There's not enough talent today. Well, I'm going to get into that in a minute. But the talent comes from people that you have here in your population that they grow up and they stay here, or the people that go away for an education and then come back because their friends are here, their family are here, and then new people that move here. And you got to have places for all these people to live and a lot of different options. And so that leads to this growing population. And everybody knows we are like 70% of our GDP we're a consumer-driven economy. It's that personal consumption. So having more people here and stimulating the economy and growing the economy is great because you're creating that residential tax base, which complements that commercial tax base from the growing companies. And so there's a secret number that every jurisdiction has. It's like, what is your split between residential and commercial? So Goochland County, 90% residential, 10% commercial. And in Henrico County, it's 70-30. And so you got to know that number because you got to keep it going enough to fuel, which number 5 is that growing support. So taxes fuel the government services, and then your growing companies and personal wealth that comes a lot from business support the NGOs, support the community foundation of Greater Richmond and others that, all the foundations, the money, a lot of it comes from the private sector, and they all support, in some way or another, they try to help support a growing workforce, training and development, and a lot of the other things that are important to people's quality of life, and especially underserved. But this growing support doesn't happen if you don't have these first 4 steps. So you got to have that, and then that allows for upward mobility and really helping talent development and adding people to the workforce, but lifting them up. It might not have had the advantages of other folks. And that ultimately leads to equitable growth. And that's where everyone thrives and the underserved communities grow. And so when you look at this model, it really is growing the equitable economy. But this is how we all think about where do we fit in on this. So you can't just focus on one side or the other. And you got to keep score along the way. And so there are a lot of great organizations that provide comparative data. And one of them is the Brookings Institution. And they have on their website a subsection called Cities and Communities. And all these different scores, which basically are every step of the model, you can find out how are we doing as RVA, and you can look at us and compare us to other regions. And that's important to do because here's the sad news. We are not competing at the level of our competitive set. When you look at all those dimensions, we're slightly behind. In fact, we're behind the U.S. average, and we're behind other cities that are a million plus. And our region is 1.3 million. And so I get to be the guy to come here this morning and go, guess what? We got to work harder. We got to go faster. And I tell you, when you just look at the most important metric of growth, it's called gross domestic product, or what is your total economy putting out every year? Well, look over the past 10 years at our competitive set and look at the U.S. average in total, and you can see we're pulling up the back. That isn't healthy. And all of us have these wonderful lives, and I just live a block away, so you can imagine what my life is, right? That gives us a false sense of how our community is really doing. It really does. You've got to take a broader view and put it into context, because the more you can grow, the more you have the ability to support the underserved and support your community. So the way to do this without going online and looking up all the cities is as you travel around, look for cranes. This is the Common Man Economic Development Model. How many cranes do you see across the Richmond skyline? Then go to Nashville or Charlotte and just look around. It's just shocking. So yes, we are very comfortable here, but we got some work to do. We have some work to do. So at the same time that this traditional model, here it is, at the same time, we're seeing a lot of disruption taking place in our economy, in our society. And I want to share what I think are three big things that are happening that are complicating this model and actually making it so we've got to work a little bit harder. But there's a decreasing availability of talent and increasing needs on the other side. So if you got both of these going on, you go like, oh my gosh, we got some work to do here. So here are three key trends to put this into perspective, what's happening. And really, when you think about trends, all the information is out there. You just have to connect the dots. Look at demographics, look at social trends, cultural trends, look at technology shifts, and that gives you a picture of tomorrow. So here are three that I think are fundamental to our discussion today. The first one is shortage of workers. So our unemployment rate's at 3.5%. Oh my God, it's like a historic low. Right now, it's hard to hire people. I have a little tiny 25-person shop. It is hard to hire people. Historic low. But here's what's going on. We're getting older. It's called the age wave. And so we're going to go to about 20% senior makeup in our population. This gives me great comfort because I'm one of the older folks in this age wave. But people say, what's it going to be like, John? Well, it's really simple. We're going to look like Florida because Florida's 20% senior going to 30% senior. So when you're in Florida and seeing everybody and seeing all the helpful ramps and all of that, that's what it's going to be like here. We're headed to 20% senior. And it's not going to stop. It's not when the last boomer dies. Boomers were given an extra 3 years for their generation. So if you take that away and just look at how babies were born, and every year, out to 2050, 2060, we're going to have an increase in the 65 plus population. It's amazing. And here's why. Two fundamental things. We are living longer thanks to VCU Health and all that research and every town, all the academic medical centers that are figuring this out. And like yesterday, even the announcement with the pig kidney putting into a human. I mean, that's breakthrough. So we're living longer, and our fertility rates are declining precipitously, right? This is the number of kids per woman in the birthing years because we're actually postponing having kids and having them when they're 30. And we're not as fertile then. We're only having one kid or two kids. The baby boom, we had 4 kids per family, 3.7. And so this is projected out for the next 50 years to be about around 1.7. The demographers don't see this going back to that baby boom. So when you start thinking about this, these two forces, longevity revolution and this whole idea of the fertility rate going down, their population pyramid is fundamentally shifting. And this is baby boomers when they were really young on the left men and on the right women. And look at them as almost the pig in the python, but look at the population pyramid as we go through time, and then we go out into the future. So the population pyramid or rectangles turning into triangles turning into a rectangle. Look at this. So when you look at the bottom portion of this, that's in fact the people that aren't being born. So Toys R Us, where are they? Gone. They got blockbustered, right? Because we lost half a million of the market. These people aren't being born. So it has big implications. The last decade, our population's increased by 9%, but a lot of older people getting older, not going away to the next calling, but our workforce only grew by 5%. And so when you look at where's the workforce growing, it's that older group, the 55%. When you look over the past decade, that younger group really declined. So that's what the people out there are screaming, I need more workers, I need more workers. And we like young workers. We don't have to pay them quite as much. They're really creative. They have a bunch of energy. So it's good. Not bashing older workers. I'm one of them. But here's the key. Looking out into the future, even a bigger decline in younger workers, and it's all demography. So the workforce, the war for talent is on, and it's not news. This was written about by a lot of our friends that we see around the country and the work we do. But now people are getting it. Now people understand the systemic problem. And then the generational factors coming into play. The young Gen Zs, half of them really don't want to work for an employer. They want to stitch together a bunch of freelance opportunities and be in control of their own lives and not work for the man. So complicated, right? All right. Well, why don't we just get more people to move here and take care of it that way, right? Just be a hot spot. Well, there are fewer people moving today. In fact, historically, our moving rate is at an all-time low. We used to move a whole lot back right after World War II, and it was really one person in the household had the job, and different areas had different kinds of jobs. But now we have two people in the workforce, and most cities offer the same kind of jobs. It's not like one region just has a preponderance of this kind of job or that kind of job. So we're not seeing people move. And when you start to look at it, the biggest moving is happening within a county, people moving between neighborhoods or just across the county line, but staying in the city. Across the state, it's only like 2%. So people aren't moving. So that's not going to take care of our workforce problem unless we are really attractive. And who are the movers? It's the Gen Zs and the millennials. And then people kind of settle down after that. So, wow, these are the people we need. But work is no longer tied to place. And so when you look at why people moved, and we've done a lot of this, we see this post-COVID attractive new kind of style of working, of telework, and it actually works. So those traditional drivers of your household location, it used to be, well, it's where my job is, but hopefully it's where my friends and family are, and it fits my lifestyle. And it was about a third, a third, a third. Those were the factors when we said, why do you live where you live? But now, fits my lifestyle and my friends and family. I can work from anywhere. So wow, what a consequence. Huge shift. And then the last one is the most profound one. When I think about disrupting the model and how we've got to work harder, I call it the affordability crisis. And this is what things cost and the capacity do you have to pay for them, right? So I'm just going to give you some big headlines like food. We all are paying more for food, but look how food prices have inflated to wages. Or look at cars, new cars and used cars. So the color line is how much the price of cars are going up, new and used, and then the blue line are our wages. And then look at homes, and we're going to talk a lot about this today. Unbelievable inflation going back to 1965. I just thought you just can't afford a home. Home's supposed to be 2.5% more than your income. And when I started work here in Richmond, my first salary was like $35,000, and I bought a little starter home on Stewart on the other side of U of R for like $68,000. That made sense. And then I rented it out to two friends of mine. I was sitting happy. But you can't do that today. It's 10 times your income. But the point of this is that it's harder and harder for half of America. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They can't cover an emergency. And then this wealth gap has gotten out of control. So you hear the Federal Reserve talk about this a lot. And that's the number of assets you have when you're over 62 versus when you're 40 and under. It used to be a 7-fold difference between people in those two categories. Now it's almost a 15-fold difference. And so when you look today at some of the major indices of our health, it's a little scary. This is U.S. student loan debt, all-time high at $1.7 trillion. How are you supposed to pay for a house that's 10 times more expensive than your income when you also have student debt? And then credit card debt, all-time high. And you look at auto loan debt, all-time high. And then add all those together, because you got to have a lot of those in your wallet, in your pocket, in your life. It's like, oh my gosh. And now we're starting to see it. Now we're seeing a little bit of delinquency, 6% on car loans, and that's going up. So I think it's a scary time. It's a scary time. So the conclusion for me, and I hope you'll agree, that winning regions of tomorrow, they got to become increasingly appealing to capture that slow mover rate, but they got to become more affordable, especially in some of those bigger things like housing. If we're going to attract the workers we need to make the model work, to really be able to lift up everybody. And so 3 traits, I think, of winning regions of tomorrow, or 10 traits of winning regions of tomorrow, and what we share with people. I can come back and talk about this another time, but it falls into these 10 buckets. And I'm just going to go real fast because I want to get to 1 or 2 in particular, but you got to have a shared story. What's your vision? What are you about, the Richmond RVA region? And then you got to organize it and get people the messaging to have positive buzz that fuels excitement from other people that want to come to Richmond, want to come to the region. And you got to have livable places. You got to have 15-minute areas that we call activity centers, like Scott's Addition. People don't always want to get in their car, especially the younger people, to go find out what's happening all the way across town. And this is why Hampton Roads doesn't work very well. It's too spread out. Those activity centers haven't been really cultivated in a way that avoids the fear of missing out, the FOMO. And then affordable spaces, you gotta have this because of all the stress that everybody has that you just saw. You gotta have affordable spaces in those livable places. And you got to be hyper connected in transportation. I know we're working on that, but our bus system is nothing compared to other jurisdictions. And just wait, we're going to have autonomous vehicles real soon. And then you got to be attracted to the younger generation. You got to be a millennial magnet. You just saw the workforce numbers. And then an educational village. You got to think about it as a whole continuum and really make sure that there's a pipeline to training workers. And then a dynamic workforce is facilitating job placement and doing it at scale. Our workforce ecosystems, and we've done huge projects for Charlotte. There's a big disconnect between what the employers need and what our ecosystem's developing and pushing out. So that's a whole nother, I think, trait of winning cities up and regions of tomorrow. And then beyond borders, you can't do it alone. It's not just government answers. You gotta hold hands and not let jurisdictional lines get in the way. And that's a big barrier for affordable housing. It's just different in every jurisdiction. So that's another one. And then Big Tent. I didn't take you through how diverse we're going to become. But in 2045, here in the Richmond region, the minority is the majority. And so you got to be a Big Tent where everybody feels like they belong. So these are the 10 traits that I could spend an hour on each one. But the most important of all these traits, and frankly, why you guys came out on a rainy Saturday, it's affordable housing. And I want to show you back in time some studies that we have done on the sort of model of winning cities and winning regions. We did some work back in 2013, and Sherry was part of this, and Laura. This was trying to, how do we make ourselves more of a millennial village to be more exciting for the young people to stay here and others to come here? And in that study, we asked this question: what do you think about a city as a place you really want to live? How important are each of the following to you? And look at the top of this list. We included all these other places we were competing against for young talent. Well, it's got to be safe. It's got to have a variety of employment options, and it's got to have quality and affordable housing options. The top of the list. So, oh my gosh, you take this, put it under your arm and deliver. Like, this is what we've got to do. This was the recipe for us. And the other ones are important. They're placemaking attributes that we can work on, but you got to do those top three. And then we did a study, kind of a similar sort of initiative, but it was across the region, and it had the public sector and private sector. It was called the Capital Region Collaborative in 2017, and that had a lot of research to help inform it as well. And when you think about a place you really want to live, how important are each of the following to you? A place that, well, look at that, safety and has quality, affordable housing, top of the list. And this was across all residents, not just younger people. But interesting, in that same study, we said, what do you think about those same attributes in describing our region? Are we delivering on that? Well, affordable housing, only a top two box was 56%. So huge fall off from what we want and what we're delivering, what we call a performance gap. So, oh my gosh, we got some work to do on this. And then I could bring study after study from different jurisdictions, and it all says the same thing. This is a recent one in Hampton Roads, same kind of question in the survey. You look at the top of the list, affordable housing, because people are people. They want to have a roof over their head that they can afford. And so housing matters. That's why we're here. And it really fits into this bigger story. And it's a bigger story about talent, quality of life, upward mobility. We have the right topic for this hour. We've got to have more affordable spaces. So we need to attack this. And I tell you, when I think about it, I only have one slide on affordable housing, but today Richmond is in the top 10 of the most difficult U.S. cities for Gen Zs to become homeowners. Unbelievable. And you're going to hear from our incredible experts all morning. This is a fundamental challenge we have to solve. And we have to solve it for helping individual people, but we have to solve it for our model in being competitive as we move forward as a major region in America. So I'll stop there, see if you have any questions. But I know we're going to have a big question and answer period in the panel, so we can. Yes, sir. That slide really, the economic development people have a list of the cities they feel like when they're putting proposals together and competing for prizes, that those cities are often in the consideration set by the expanding company. So, yeah, yeah, you used to. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
You have been diagram about like remote work,
Yeah.
specifically in family and friends and just general area of development. So do you have stats around, I guess, companies that establish benchmarks, like we will pay this salary range if you live in New York or California,
Hmm.
and how that drives workers' decisions on where they live and what they transfer?
I don't have research from the the employers in Richmond on that. Um, but I do know that employers in general are moving to greater transparency on career paths and what people pay at each level and all of that. So I think that we've learned as business leaders that it's better to be transparent than to let everybody just figure it out themselves on Glassdoor and others. And so I think that that's going to become more and more an issue that you're going to have to pay competitive salaries because people are going to pick a place and work where they want to work. So, yeah.
I moved from Monroe, Virginia, here 6 years ago.
Yeah.
My son and his family followed me, and now they've taken off and left. But he is working for a company out of Virginia, and I can see, I can think of at least half a dozen, just off the top of my
Right.
head, young people who moved from higher paying metropolitan areas, they have brought their salaries with them,
Right.
and they work from that.
And we've got to get over. I'm working with one of the counties right now on economic development and the metrics that we're using to gauge success. And certainly, GDP is an important success in the number of jobs that you have in the county. But we got to go beyond that now. We got to also talk about um, what kind of quality of life we're offering, and those people that are working elsewhere. Well, chances are their spouse are working here. They're paying taxes here. They're spending money here in our consumer-driven economy. So,
Raise that housing.
right, but that's putting pressure on the housing. Exactly, and I think probably Laura and Greta. Yeah,
We spring over here that phenomenon of higher wages coming
yeah,
to Richmond, which is good, but it is looking for work that we do on a
housing
very modest end of household income, so much challenging because those individuals are driving the prices
pricing.
that make it unsustainable
Yeah,
for us to serve lower income households.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's all of this work takes place over time, but the trends are conspiring in a way to make it even more challenging. And that's what I hope you guys got from this. All right, one more.
Maybe such a tone of a reading article. We just get some brand cut out. We want it to be expensive when we sell it, we want it to be cheap on the side. Right? It's an asset. If we look at it as an asset and we want it to grow in value, it's a consumption thing. Where we want to live, we want it to be cheap, we're going to buy it. And until we figure out that schizophrenia, I'm not sure how we're going to.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, let me get my friends up here. Um, I tell you, you have the rock stars in affordable housing.
And Cheryl, you are up next.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I don't have any slides. I'm just going to maybe take what John just presented kind of from the 30,000 feet and bring it down a little more locally to maybe tee up a local housing conversation. I'm going to try to do that. And just to give you sort of a sense of what's happening in the region to try to go after some of these issues that John's talked about. Just real quickly about the Community Foundation. For those of you who don't know us, we are a philanthropic organization. We are very fortunate for a region our size, how generous people are philanthropically here. We are probably in the top 10 in terms of asset size across the country of community foundations. We have a community endowment of over $400 million that people have contributed over the years. So what that does, it gives us the ability to spin off money annually that gets distributed to nonprofits throughout the community. My partners here are beneficiaries of that. I work very closely with them in housing. The other cool thing is that the University of Richmond Spider Management manages our endowment. So we are part of the Richmond Fund. We are actually the largest member of the Richmond Fund and one of the founders. So you all invest our assets and help us grow over time and do a really good job of that. And it's an amazing partnership. Just real quickly, we have probably about $50 million that comes in annually through our foundation from individuals and families that have philanthropic funds, and we have about $50 million that goes out annually to a lot of different organizations in the Commonwealth, as well as most of that locally. So I'm very proud to be part of that. And so when I think about that and our responsibility and our role, it's bigger than just money. It's more about leadership and responsibility. So when you have that much resource that you're trying to manage and get out in the community, it sort of gives you a higher sense of purpose and actually puts the pressure on philanthropy to do more good and have greater impact. And that's really why we try to kind of focus on that. So one of the things that we are doing to John, and John's part of this, Laura's part of this, Greta's part of it, everybody here, we're all really kind of connected at the hip to begin to kind of think about this idea of, how do we make our region thrive around the Richmond region? And so many of us have been working since COVID to actually come out of COVID with a whole new reimagined focus for our region around opportunity and access to opportunity. And while this is a great region, and I hear, University of Richmond is a gem for the Richmond region. It's a beautiful campus, great people, talented people. We have all of those wonderful assets, and we are very fortunate people want to live here, and we have an amazing quality of life. But we are a tale of two cities and two regions. We have a lot of wealth, a lot of growth here, but we have a lot of people that are not benefiting from that. And so many of us, the Chamber, Plan RVA, which is our local government planning district, commission, and Chamber, which represents the business community, we kind of came together and said we're going to build this three-legged stool to come together and collaborate on. When we think about the next 10 to 15 years, we really want to honor what everybody gets here, but we don't want to leave people behind anymore. And we are a community with systemic racism and things that have held people behind, and we're more aware of what those things are. So we don't want to be the same community 10 to 15 years from now. So while we want to attract and have people stay here, we want to grow talent within our communities, and we want to create communities of opportunity for everybody. And that's my friend Greta's term, which I love. And so that's the bigger sort of frame by which we're working. As we've been doing this work, and John said, there's really kind of, three big things that are emerging in the region that we have to tackle. Housing is critical. And the good news is, we are learning so much from other regions and other cities. We know what our challenges are. Some communities have not gotten ahead of it. We've got to find ways to do that, and we've got to really work collectively and together to do that. But there are really kind of three big things that are emerging in the region that we're going to be able to frame some work and actually set some measurable indicators across the region. And the whole thing about this is collaboration, partnerships, and aligning resources for scale. That's really what we have to work on. So when we talk about community impact and community building, we've got to be able to scale some of these initiatives across the region, and we've got to focus on the people that need this the most. So some people may say, well, I'm kind of left out of that, and maybe you have to be, because we have to really put resources to where we're seeing gaps and where we're seeing things fall behind. So the three things that are really emerging in the region, you've heard it: workforce development and talent, education, quality education for everyone. We have challenges in our city around quality education for our kids, but quite frankly, housing is connected to that, health is connected to that. So we have built communities that have isolation of people living in poverty where there's no way to kind of disrupt that and create opportunities for those communities. So we have to be really intentional if we want to lift up everyone in our community. And the thing around, I think you're going to hear about housing. You know, we all know, and somebody made the point, wealth building begins with when you buy your first house. That has been a trajectory. We have big gaps in Black home ownership. We have gaps in places across. So when you think about it, Nikki, what you were saying, that's your first foray into wealth building. You're building equity, and you can build that over time. And more people are having less access to do that. More people are going to fall behind. So that's really, really critical. We need to have good jobs for them to have income to be able to do that. So all of this is really connected, and we're going to have to work more integrated and more aligned as we go forward. You know, we do this in philanthropy. We bucket these areas, but people don't live in buckets. You don't, oh, here's my housing issue today. Here's my education. It really starts with where you live. If you can have a safe place to live, a great place to live, and you're in a place where you can see access and have connections, that opens the door to so many other things. And if we are not really focusing on that, we're not going to deal with our education issues, and we're not going to deal with our workforce and talent. So my message is to say this is all interconnected. And not only do we have to focus on the issues, but at the end of this, we've got to paint a picture of the face of the people we're really trying to solve for. It moves beyond the issue, and we're going to have to hold ourselves accountable as a region to ensure that we are tackling these issues the way we need to be doing it. And so that's my leadership commitment. That's many of ours in the room. And those are kind of things that we're trying to come together around. The other thing I would say is that, our educational institutions are really critical to this. And, how we figure out a way to access the talent of the students in this university to be part of those solutions with us, how we do that with VCU. We have a lot of great higher ed institutions. And sometimes, our institutions and our neighborhoods, we live in silos, right? And so if we can sort of find more ways to bring this bigger vision for the region, to bring students and bring more people into the work, this is great today because we're trying to introduce you to some things that we're trying to work on. There can be more partnerships and collaborations to actually work to solve our problems. And I think what we're trying to do today is to say, care about housing. It's really, really important. And help us from your perspectives, from where you come from where you live, to really help us shape the strategies as we try to move forward. So I'm not going to go deep into the housing conversation because we do have the experts in the room. Many of us have been in this community a long time, the three of us and John, trying to really sort of push the rock up the hill around some of these issues. And the good news is, we have made this is a great place, and we have a lot of strong assets. But think about, 15 years from now, if people looking at Richmond said, this is the most equitable, inclusive community I have ever seen. Like, that would be amazing. And more people here benefit from everything that this region has to offer. That's the goal. For those of us that are around for a little while, that can continue to move that, but we need the younger folks to be with us because this is generational, because we're really trying to think about this. And so you can tell I have a lot of passion around this and really trying to focus resources. Last thing I'll say, the resource focus is really key. COVID was interesting because many of us were on the ground working COVID, trying to figure out what we do for our region. The money that started to flow in this community and communities across the country, we didn't have a plan, right? We didn't have a place where we could say, we need this federal money to go here so it advances us going forward. We need to learn from that as a region and work collaboratively to say, we're going to invest in affordable housing. We're with this over the next 10 to 15 years. So any type of resource that can come in the community to move that, we have a plan. We want to advance that. So it's moving money to where it's making the difference, because there are silos of money going through this community in a lot of different ways. And so my commitment is really from the philanthropic nonprofit side to make sure that we're working better together so that the people giving that money gets a greater return on their investment, but ultimately that we get greater community impact in the region. So that's real high level, but just any questions, I'd be happy to take any questions. I think really the meat of the program is with the folks coming up. But anything locally or any other question, Nikki?
We build communities of isolation. Expect on that, but
Yeah, I think Greta and Laura can talk to this a little bit more. And the one thing I think you'll see, particularly with housing, it sits on a continuum, right? Like we kind of think about homelessness to home ownership as we think about housing. But if you think about, the city, for example, we have the highest concentration of poverty in the city in our housing communities, in our public housing communities. So there's a whole lot of innovation and things that we have to think about. So when you look at the poverty numbers for the city of Richmond, high concentration, a lot of people living there, but we're seeing that more on the edges of the city, right? So if you sort of the city in the middle and you Henrico, Chesterfield, we're seeing that go further out into the city. So right on the edges is where you're seeing, more of our low-income minority communities are living in those neighborhoods. A lot of Hispanic immigrant communities are building around that are more low income. So part of this is, I think, and Greta tries this a lot, like how do we build a more integrated housing strategy that, brings more people together so there's more opportunity to lift everybody up. But a lot of our communities, we have very wealthy communities, high concentration of wealth, not, in my opinion, a lot of integrated neighborhoods where you really see that in other communities. And so it's pretty easy if you live on River Road, you don't have to ever see any of that, right? You're in this community, and unless you have to go into the public housing communities, you don't really see where the poverty sits, or in South Richmond, or Jeff Davis Highway and some of those things. And I think the one thing I would say that concerns me, and I have a daughter that's 31 trying to buy a house in the city, we are at these neighborhoods, though, where housing becomes available, we have developers coming into those neighborhoods, flipping those houses, charging a lot of money, and then we're dealing with gentrification, and we're dealing with a whole lot of other things. So I think we just have pockets of things in the around the region that we have to figure out. How do we? If I live, if I live in the wealthiest neighborhood in Chesterfield County and I don't live in the city, why should I care about that? We've got to get people to care that the city is critical to our vibrancy as a region. And so you can't just leave people out. We have to figure out how we bring that together. But if you look at the map, we have some maps where there are heat maps on those kinds of things. And that's really what we're trying to look at locally. How do we concentrate there and build some solutions that honestly give access to opportunity for more people in those neighborhoods? It's a very neighborhood-based approach. It's going to have to be, I think. Laura? Yes.
Communities across our country certainly has scarred our region. And I'll lift up some research that was done with Tom Shields, I don't know if you are, Timothy Steele at VCU, Housing Opportunities for Many People, and Clay Creek on Leisure. And that data is updated in our county. Okay, so what the data, the study was probably done about 5 years ago, and now it's been released new in May, is it looks at race, it overlays poverty, and then it looks at educational opportunities, not necessarily outcomes. And when you overlay race, poverty numbers, and then what a third reading levels, and then what is most alarming, very alarming, is AP opportunities. And what you will see in accredited schools, and all of that lines up. And I'll take it from Henrico, that's where I live. The AP opportunities in Eastern Henrico are nowhere near the AP opportunities in Western Henrico.
Yeah.
All the parents and parents in real estate, right? And so what happens here? So AP jumps that GPA. That GPA has, my kids in the GPA. that was in the social network that you and I were talking about. And then look at Ross Chetty data, we had Ross Chetty in a couple of years ago. And so where you live can so change the trajectory of your life. And because we haven't done a good job about economic and racial integration, or not the job that we can and should do, geography is so critical to your trajectory. And I think a lot of the work that we're trying to do in equity and inclusion is to say, let's make all of our communities of opportunity. You should not have to be in Western Chesterfield or Western Rica or Western Richmond. It really is an east-west divide in our region, and to be able to have those opportunities. So I really commend that study when it comes out. I'm afraid it's going to look very similar to what it looked like 6 years ago. It might look a little better, but just thinking about how unequal opportunities are, not just county to city, but within our jurisdictions.
And I would say we could tell you some horror stories, and we don't want to scare you, of trying to bring quality housing that would serve modest income households to Western Henrico, and we were chased out of the community. It was a $40 million development that we were trying to do, and got chased out with our tail between our legs, and
We're going back.
we're gonna try to go back, and we're gluttons for punishment. But I guess one little silver lining, we're working on an affordable housing development in Chesterfield, in Midlothian, which is an area that I would have never guessed that we would be able to develop. But a very generous, leader there gave us land, but we still had to go through the zoning. So at the end of the day, we'll get to potential solutions. We have to care about our fellow neighbor, regardless of race, income, socioeconomic status. And are you okay with someone who maybe is different from you living next door to you? And people say they're good with it until it comes into their neighborhood. And then the visceral reactions start. And then you think people have assumptions. We hear the same arguments all the time. You're going to bring crime in my neighborhood. We have studies after studies after studies that prove that's not true. The value of my home is going to plummet. There are studies after studies that show that that is not true. And there's a fear of change that is really one of the biggest obstacles to preventing us from ultimately creating integrated communities.
And I would say too, because I get the question all the time, how do we fix RPS? How do we fix the schools? It starts with all of that. It is not, you just wait, it's not just you put more money, but you've got to change the tax base. You've got to do a whole lot of different things if you really want those kids to see those improvements. And sometimes we're not patient, or we're not understanding as a region that this is a long-term change and policy issues we've really got to tackle. So I will close. Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Spoke earlier about how we need younger people to support rights to the Gen Zers entering the workforce. However, we see studies in Gen Zers are being impacted because we're transitioning driven by homes.
Right.
We have CPS next day post in our yesterday, so we're running cheaper, buying costs for years to come, And so then it adds that individualistic point of view for Gen Zers who are streaming this, right?
That's right. That's right.
What do we do to like fix that narrative? We do need this work to continue to keep looking at, but when you're really impactful, how to shift that.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are some of the things we're going to have to work on, because I think we are in this double-edged catch-22. We've also heard arguments in the past around, well, my kids have been all grown up, so why should my taxes be raised to support education when I'm not? That doesn't impact me anymore. So people can really get real clear about, well, I've done my duty or I can't. So it is something we're going to have to, and there's a bit of humanity about this that we're just really going to have to kind of think about, right, in terms of doing that. And I would just say, because those of us that have been doing this for a while, it is time for us, but we need to set it up so that others coming along will take on some of those issues and really help us solve for them. That's a good point. Yeah, Amy.
Redefining what it means to care. At the Boys and Girls Club, we did a map at the time of where all of our families and club members lived, and then where all of our donors lived. Of course, very obviously, you know what that map looked like. And so we can say that those donors cared, and we're just giving money.
Mm-hmm.
What we wanted was for that map to be
Yeah.
an inclusive map, and to have our members living among our donors and our donors living among our members, not just I care enough just to throw money at this, but I'm not going to care enough to live in an integrated community. And so that, what does it mean to care? Because
Yeah.
that's a whole, long-term impact instead of just short-term.
Yeah, you know, one last anecdote on this, and I promise I'll leave and let the folks know, but it's interesting. So I have a son, he's 34. They've lived in Richmond, but decided they wanted to move to outside of Tampa area. There's this whole area of Tampa that they're building new communities, new cities. I mean, it is unbelievable. And the neighborhood development is amazing. So I go to visit them. It is the most integrated, diverse community I have ever been in. Like, because in Richmond, I don't see that, right? And it's fascinating to me as I see their social networks evolving. So it's more diverse, it's people that have come with different lived experiences. So they're starting young and building their social networks around that. And I think we have our community. Richmond's been around a long time, neighborhoods have been around a long time. So this idea of new development and new growth to actually create the social connections is really going to be critical, I think, if we really want to kind of evolve that. And so it's kind of interesting to watch that and just how they, as 30-something-year-olds, look at things and think about things, because they're having conversations with people that, if they still lived in Richmond with me, they would not be having those conversations. So it's kind of, it's those are the kind of things, to your point, Amy, I think the social piece of this is really critical. So thank you all. Let me give you a clicker.
Works.
There you go.
Thank you. Good morning, and I'll just say something that wasn't mentioned. I think to understand the origins of the East-West divide that they alluded to, there's a great project that the University of Richmond has called Mapping Inequality. They just updated some of those maps that show redlining from the 1930s, and really those are the origin points of a lot of the residential segregation that happened, not just in Richmond, but across the country. So if you take a look at those maps, you'll get a good picture of why communities look what they do today. So my job is to help with local governments and other housing stakeholders in the broader community to understand what our housing challenges are here locally in the Richmond region. So I'll provide a lot of the local data on the housing market, housing trends, what's happening from the nonprofit, for-profit, local government segment to address this issue. And if at any point you have questions about any of the data, feel free to jump in. We'll try to make this a little interactive and just hopefully help provide some nuance on what you see when you're driving around the region. So you may see cranes, you may see development, you may see articles and local news all the time about recent developments that have been announced. But I think what's important to note is a lot of those are not reaching the income levels that we're talking about, and to dig into why that is and what impact that has on our local population. So these are just some national articles, headlines of recent. I think the one on the right around Gen Z's ability to buy homes. This was something that about a month or two ago caught local headlines with Richmond being there. And I think while that's disheartening, it's also again, it's just consistent across the country, right? It's not as if there's anything specific to Richmond where it's making it much more difficult for first-time home buyers to gain access to home ownership. That's just the nature of the market right now. But hopefully we can provide some context for some of that and using some local examples. So I'll start with Henrico County, and I like to start with this because I think people see us as a fast growth area. If you've been living here for, let's say 20 years or so, and you see development and you've gotten pretty comfortable, it may seem like there's a lot of change happening. This was the population of Henrico in 1984. And then you can see the growth just to 2011 to 310,000 residents within the county. And a lot of that growth happened along the major corridors, and particularly around the airport. I show this time frame because I want to ask you all, between that 1983 and 2011, how many acres of land in Henrico do you think was used for single-family homes? Any guesses? I hear a lot of C's. Anyone else? Okay. So C, 14,500 acres. The reason why I put that out is that a lot of the single-family home development that took place in our community, not just in Henrico, but in the region writ large, happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. We're not building nearly as much as we used to, despite the growth that we're experiencing in our community. So I think that's sometimes a misnomer, is that we're building too much right now, right? People see cranes, people see development, and that's not really the case. And then let's dig into some of the barriers that exist. So if you look at the counties of Henrico, Chesterfield, the city of Richmond, Hanover County, and then the town of Ashland, you take in all of that land into account. What percentage of that land area do you think allows for multifamily development, where you're able to build, zoning allows you to build multifamily housing? What percent of land do you think out of all those jurisdictions? Any guesses? 5? 10? Anyone else? So it's just over 3%. Now, a lot of that is going to be concentrated in your urban core, major corridors in Henrico and Chesterfield. But I think, again, this is sometimes the pushback that Greta and other developers will face from local communities around proposed developments, is that we have enough, right? Don't we have enough? And the reality is we certainly don't have enough, but also where you can build that is incredibly limited. If you don't have the zoning in place, you're going to have to go through a rezoning, which opens it up to a public comment process that is very contentious, can take a long time, and make development even more costly. And so there's a lot of points along the journey in getting a development in the ground that things can be made more difficult, can drive up costs. And as a region, you don't want to be an area that is stifling growth. You want to be an area that is facilitating that growth, which can help with cost, which can help with getting the production that you need to serve your population. So this is the housing continuum. This is something that we created as an organization, really to help folks understand when we're talking about affordable housing, who does that impact? A lot of times this issue suffers from myths, suffers from a lot of stereotypes around who lives in quote unquote affordable housing. And so hopefully the conversations today in this presentation help to demystify that. It's not a minority of our population. It is the bulk of our workforce. So a lot of general government employees, a lot of employees who work for some of our largest employers, like public universities, bank tellers, a lot of admin and office workers are the folks that we're talking about here. And so you can see the spectrum, those that are 30% of area median income, AMI. I won't use too many acronyms in this presentation, but that's one of the most common in the housing space. It's set by the Department of Housing and Urban Development every year. It's just area median income. Every region has an area median income. It's updated annually. So you can see the lower you are on the income spectrum, and we'll show a little bit later, the fewer housing options typically exist and the more subsidy that's required to build that housing. That's why we don't see a lot of it get built, is because it's so expensive to do so. But even as you get up to 30, 50, 80% of area median income, those are a lot of people that we interact with on a daily basis. So people that deliver food and are Uber drivers, or people that work in the restaurant industry, a lot of folks that work in the healthcare industry. These are the individuals that we're talking about who make up the bulk of this need. So this is a chart that'll show you in 2017 um, how affordable Richmond was as a community. This is actually when I moved to Richmond, and so it's pretty incredible to see the changes when you look at the next chart on the next slide. So the purple line going across the chart, those two lines represent the income you would need to afford a median value home in Chesterfield and Henrico in the city of Richmond. Um, the blue bars along the bottom of the chart, those are different job occupations here in the region. And what you'll notice, the gap is not that large between a lot of those occupations in terms of what they earn annually in wages and how much money you need to afford the median value home. Now I'll go to 2022 and you can see the change. So just in a 5-year period, how drastically our housing market has changed. And a lot of that has to do with low supply, increased demand, but we're also changing pretty considerably as a region. More and more people moving here, especially during the pandemic, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. But I think the key takeaway here is that, again, this is a majority of workers here in the region. It's not just a small segment of our population. So I think when you're hearing this issue, when you're hearing people talk about this, we usually hear a lot of thinly veiled language, or that it's going to serve those people. And quite honestly, it's going to serve a lot of people that you interact with on a daily basis. A lot of your teachers and first responders and other general government employees make up, the folks that we're talking about. Now, this will just show you visually. So this is a map of the broader Richmond region, so including jurisdictions like Powhatan and Hanover, New Kent, and Charles City. It includes the Tri-Cities and Dinwiddie. So if you make 150% of the area median income, which is around $146,000 for a household of three, all the blue on this map represents where you can afford to live. What I mean by afford to live is not spending more than 30% of your income on housing. So you have a lot of options. If you go down to just 120% of AMI, household making $117,000, there's still quite a few options, but the unaffordable areas start to grow. Now, if you make the median income, you can see how drastically this is changing. And this also demonstrates what Sherry was talking about, the pockets of isolation that start to pop up where people of lower incomes are able to purchase homes or able to rent. The other piece that this will highlight is commuting patterns. Local governments will sometimes lament the fact that a lot of their workers aren't able to live in their county, aren't able to live in their city. They'd like people who work for the city of Richmond, who work for Henrico County, to also live there. But that's just not the case, and housing has a lot to do with that. So we see a lot of people driving from the outer ring of our region in Charles City and Powhatan who work in Henrico or who work in Chesterfield, and housing has a lot to do with it. If you get down to 80% of area median income, and this one is important because this is what HUD determines someone to be low income. So this is usually the cutoff on whether or not you qualify to live in an income-restricted housing development, or if you qualify for any kind of housing assistance, like down payment assistance or something like that. But again, that was a pretty big change once you get down to 80% of area median income and where you can afford versus where you can't afford. And then, of course, when you get down to 50% of area median income. Now, what this means, of course, people are still living here. The reality is they're spending upwards of 30, 40, 50, 60% of their income on housing, with very little left over for things like groceries or recreational activities or transportation or what have you. So this puts folks in a very difficult predicament month to month, and really on the margins of one bad event, for being housing unstable. So we don't have any questions thus far before I get to some of the basics around affordable housing. So I'm going to ask some or answer some basic questions that usually come up. How does affordable housing get built? So typically, when we say affordable housing, the thing that gets conjured in a lot of folks' mind is public housing, right? Um, Public housing is kind of the number one way that housing gets built, affordable housing gets built in this country. It has been so for many, many, many decades. Number one way is through what's called the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program. This was started in around 1990. It is a federal program that's administered by each state. So we have a housing finance agency that administers this program, and there's a limited number of what's called tax credits. These developers apply for the tax credits, and if they're selected, then they can exchange those credits with investors for equity that would go into the development, and that helps make it more feasible to build. So the reason I point this out is this is showing you allocations and tax credits in the Richmond region since that program began. And you'll see that the competitiveness of the program means that there are some years where our region won't get projects that are allocated tax credits. And you're competing with the entire state, you're competing with for-profit, nonprofit developers. And so there's a limited number of credits, and there's only going to be a certain number of units that come out of this. So in years like 2005, you can have nearly 2,000 units that get allocated, and then there's some years like 2010 where you don't have any. But that's the best program that we have, and it is limited, but it's the number one way that housing does get built on the affordable side. Yes.
The last 5 years, there have been it's been oversubscribed House 4. So there's 5 credits. There are 4 times as many applications to the amount of credits that can be allocated. And each application that we submit, that's about $4 million of expenses to even submit, and your chances are only 25% that you get awarded credits then.
And it's not an easy process, as I understand it.
So folks from around the state apply, but there are 4 times as many applications asking for credits. The total amount of credits we ask for is 4 times the amount of available credits that the state has to invest. And so it's very competitive, and you have to expend a lot of money to even submit your application when you only have the last few years, a 25% chance of being successful in getting that resource in order to advance your project. It's about a 400-page application that goes in, so it's a lot of criteria. It's pretty transparent. You can go onto Virginia Housing's website and it'll tell you, but we jump through hoops in order to try to get our score up as high as we can to give us an edge on trying to be successful. And as a company, we've done well in getting them, but it's pretty crazy, but it is the best tool that we have right now.
And I've got some slides on just a fraction of some of those requirements that you have to adhere to. So this begs a question around, what does this product look like? This is one of the other misnomers that we're combating all the time in this space, where people have the perception that it's housing of inferior quality, and which leads to the thinking that it's going to bring the property values down, right? So here's some examples, and Greta will show some, or at least we'll talk about that a little bit. But this is one of Greta's organization's recent projects in the city of Richmond. To give you an example, this was also went through the tax credit program. So that's one example. Here's another one from Enterprise Community Development, also in the city of Richmond. And I believe that this project serves seniors, some of whom who may be on fixed incomes. And then here's some single-family examples as well that are affordable housing, going to serve first-time home buyers. The point of me bringing this up is that here's just a fraction of some of the minimum design and construction standards that if you're going to apply to the tax credit program that you have to adhere to. These are non-negotiable. Again, this is not all of them. my point in bringing this up is that only the projects of the highest quality are going to be the ones that get funded, right? And you get bonus points if you do actually, if you adhere to things like Earthcraft certifications and energy efficiency. So you know that there may be other projects that are going to do those things and may cost more money to do that and commit to it, but what gets put in the ground are going to be the ones that are of the highest quality. Um, and Virginia Housing is incredibly meticulous about going out to these properties and inspecting them. I've been on some of those inspections. They look at, you know, all the minute things that you could imagine, the slope of the windowsill, everything, to ensure that the product that's being funded by them is of great quality. And I'll also just note, market rate development doesn't have to go through any of this. So you could say that something is a luxury apartment, for example. That doesn't mean much. It's just kind of a marketing ploy. And again, for the projects, if you're going to get funded, they have to go through all of these hurdles just to have the opportunity to get funding. And Greta will talk about a little bit later. Having this funding used to be more of a guarantee that your project will be able to close and you have all the sources that you need. But because of the current market, it's becoming more and more difficult, and costs of building housing are going up. And so, even after getting tax credits, there can still be gaps. You'll need to go out and fundraise in order to make a deal happen. So, I alluded to this a little bit earlier. This is the most basic metric that we have to understand what does affordable mean. At a very basic level, if you're spending more than 30% of your income on housing, you're considered cost burden. If you're spending over half of your income on housing, you're considered severely cost burden. This is something that is reflected in about a third of all households in the Richmond region. So I'll show this to you based on each jurisdiction, because I think some of the challenges that we face around this issue is that people view it as a city problem, right? They think this is just an urban issue. Poverty for many years has been moving to the suburbs, and you can see that our suburban jurisdictions also have a high percentage of people that are cost burdened. A little over 50,000 households spend over half of their income on housing costs. So, again, we view this as a regional issue that requires regional solutions in order to address it. Now, I'll show you some more recent data on some current housing trends that explain where we are today. Richmond is growing. We talked about population growth and why that's important in the first presentation. So by 2050, it's estimated our metropolitan region will have about 1.3 million residents. And to zero in a little bit, look at 2021. The majority of our population growth was domestic migration, which means that's a lot of people during the pandemic who were taking advantage of expansion of remote work, moving from larger metropolitan areas to take advantage of the cost of living here in Richmond, which it's always been an advantage that Richmond has had to places like Northern Virginia and DC, Nashville now, which is great, but that puts added pressure on existing residents and an already limited supply. So you have more competition for a limited supply, which contributes to the increasing rise in rents that we're seeing. The other thing, and this is, I think goes into the conversation earlier around younger generation. The long-running joke about millennials living at home with their parents. A lot of the data show that there's some truth to that. But we saw in the last 4 or 5 years, more and more folks in the younger adult population moving out and either living with a partner, living with a roommate, living with whoever. And so we saw the biggest growth in young adults living on their own or moving out of their parents' household in the last 3 to 4 years. But still roughly a third of individuals between 18 and 34 in our region do live with their parents. And I hope that we're kind of painting the picture that housing costs have a lot to do with that. So if you look at household incomes, this is showing you by some of the jurisdictions in our region and by race. And I want to point out the red bar, if you notice, multiracial, there was a pretty big jump between 2019 and 2020. And we dug into that a little bit, and really the main reason for that is during the 2020 census, we had more people than ever identify as multiracial, where previously and other census they had identified as maybe one racial group now are identifying as multiracial. So that was kind of an outlier that we saw within the data. But I think this is just really illustrating some of the disparities that still exist along the lines of race and income. And then also, as is the case with renters. So renters' incomes lag far behind that of homeowners, which further contextualizes why it's harder for folks to become first-time home buyers. The rising rents, the ability or inability to save up for down payment, and to compete in the homeownership market. All right, so this is one of the more common charts that we show our local governments, and it really just emphasizes for our workforce, specific to Richmond, the challenges that people are facing right now. So these are the 5 fastest growing job occupations here in our region, and then we compare that to median rent across the 4 major jurisdictions. And you can see the gap in which 4 of the 5 cannot afford median rent. So again, when people are thinking about who this is impacting, it's impacting a lot of the industries that make Richmond a prosperous region and make us unique. But the ability of those folks to maintain stability in housing is incredibly challenging. Switching to homeownership, I think this isn't a surprise for many folks. If you look at how flat supply has been in recent years, despite some crazy changes in 2020. And then if you look at rising prices, so this is a snapshot of the city of Richmond. Between 2017 and 2022, there was an increase in the median single-family home price of 85%. So in 2017, median single-family home price in the city of Richmond was $210,000. By the summer of 2022, it was $389,000. So that is an incredibly huge jump. And again, I think it's indicative of this is a growing region. It's indicative of more and more competition, but also some of the things that Sherry spoke to towards the end of her presentation. A lot of areas that are experiencing rapid change and displacement and gentrification concerns around neighborhood change are reflected in some of these changes. Now, I'll go back to young homeowners because we did see the largest growth among young homeowners between 2016 and 2020 compared to other age groups. So other age groups they were pretty flat over that time period in terms of new homeowners, but there was a slight increase in households under the age of 34. So that was pretty encouraging. I think a lot of that, contributed to some of the interest rate market early on in the pandemic. But we know the landscape looks a little bit different now. So what does this mean, big picture, in terms of our region, what we're able to produce? So this gives you a snapshot. Since 2020, we've been able to add over 4,000 affordable units as a region, which is really good. A lot of that is powered by our nonprofit community, nonprofit developers, both single family and multifamily, but also contributions from some single family developers as well. At the same time, though, we lost over 1,600 affordable units. So one part of the tax credit program that I didn't mention is that there's an affordability period that you have to remain affordable for a certain amount of years. After that, developers can choose to maybe sell the property. They can reapply for tax credits, keep it affordable, and renovate the development, or they can convert to market rate. And we've seen some of that conversion. We've seen some of those transactions happen where once affordable properties have now converted to market rate and the rents have gone up. And so we've lost those units. And so I think this is important when you're thinking about solutions. Most communities aren't going to be able to build their way out of the issue. Preservation is equally important in order to make sure that people who are currently living here can remain here. Now, this also shows you where the need is greatest, how difficult it is to build for people on the lower end of the income spectrum. So if you're at 30% of your median income or even 50%, those blue lines represent how many units are unaffordable in our region to those individuals. So if you're between 50 and 80, you have a lot more options than those on the lower end of the income spectrum. So again, those where our needs are greatest concentrated. That's consistent across the board in the country. I think everyone's trying to find ways in which you can build to that income level, but I think without federal subsidies, it's going to be pretty unlikely. Now, I'm going to show you these charts because that was a lot of census data, and census data is great, but if you're communicating to elected officials or local governments, we're trying to understand what does this mean for my district, right? What does this mean for residents, my constituents that I'm talking to on a daily basis? So we have a program in our organization called the Housing Resource Line, where if someone, let's say in Henrico County, is looking for rental assistance, or they were just evicted and they need somewhere else to live, they can call in and get navigated to existing housing resources. So this enables us to have real-time data on what's happening in our community for housing instability. This is just a snapshot of Henrico County. We do this for the entire region. But in 2023, you can see month to month how many people in the region called seeking housing resources or services. You can see what they were looking for. Most of them were looking for financial assistance or looking for rental options. And that can be someone that just moved to Henrico 2 weeks ago, or they're planning to move to the region and they're curious about where can they live, what can they afford based on the income that they think they're going to have. We also have people that are looking for legal support. So maybe they have an unlawful detainer and are unsure what this means. So I actually have to leave my apartment in 10 days. So connecting them with legal aid to help them understand where they are in the eviction process. And as we also commonly see, many people who have housing needs, they also have food insecurity, or they may need help with benefits. They may have compounding issues that are exacerbating their housing situation. And so we track what other needs people have so that other organizations in the nonprofit sphere can also serve them. We try to take care of the housing piece and then assess what else they need and then communicate that to them so they can get those other needs taken care of. Living situation of callers, most of them are renting in some form. Some of them are doubled up, which means they have a roommate or they have a friend that they called, hey, I just got evicted. Can I stay with you for a little while until I get on my feet? Some of them are living in hotels. So that is a big part of, a growing part, unfortunately, of our housing market in the Richmond region is people living in motels. Paying quite a bit of money on a weekly basis to stay there, but because there just aren't options for them, or if you have an eviction on your record and your credit is challenged and you're unable to get approved for an apartment, motels are usually going to be your best bet. And so this is another dynamic of the issue that we haven't really delved into a little bit. I won't talk about homelessness too much, but what I will say is that the number one solution to that is more housing, and it's upstream intervention, and that's why it's important for us to think about how we can produce more and more units for people that are low income. We also track how many people are under 18, so how many kids are in these situations of housing instability, because school attendance, all of those things are greatly tied to stability at home. And we see that also ties into educational success long term. Age range, and I just show this because it demonstrates that housing instability can impact folks in all stages of life. So we have young adults that call in, or we even have teenagers, as young as 15, maybe calling in on behalf of their parents. We also have seniors upwards of 80 years old calling in. So we see it all through this program, and I think it's helped shed light on how diverse this issue is, how varied it is, and the interventions that are required in order to address it. And then we also collect it by zip code. So I can say to an elected official who is maybe hearing to the contrary from some of the residents, well, we don't have a housing issue in our district. We don't need more housing. And we can show how many people in their area in the last month have called in looking for housing. And we know that's just a fraction of the true need. So it's been really helpful to make our local government partners better consumers of data. So those are just kind of the main trends that we're seeing. And I'll wrap up with some of the progress that's been happening in the region. Just take a look at last year. There were over 700 units of affordable housing either completed or under construction across our region, both single family and multifamily. Here's a snapshot of some of those developments. On the preservation side, we had over 500 homes that received some kind of preservation service. So someone who maybe needs a home repair or weatherization got done for their home or complete home rehabilitation. So you know, the construction and all of that, I think, catches a lot of the headlines. But when we think about our growing senior population, people who are like aging in place and who are physically and fiscally unable to keep up with home maintenance, these programs are essential because you have a aging housing stock. If you're living with a leaking roof, for example, for 2 years, um, that's a big challenge. That's a big concern for someone who has diverse health needs. So this is important to focus on, and Sherry and her foundation and others are able to support those organizations who provide those services. And then our local governments. We've seen more and more concerted efforts focused on housing in the last few years. Um, and it's been really encouraging to see. I think the pandemic helped with that quite a bit. So we have less of a reluctance to spend local dollars on housing. Where previously, it's just all of the federal dollars that they're entitled to, and they have to spend on housing. They'll spend those, but spending actual local dollars and having it be a public priority, that has increased over the last few years. So we're really encouraged by that, and we'll talk about that in some of our panel discussion. So I'll leave you with this, and this is a case study that just illustrates neighborhood challenges and how developments don't get built. So this is an example of where a local church wanted to build affordable housing. They had 15 acres of land. They wanted to partner with a nonprofit and for-profit developer to build a few hundred units of affordable housing to serve seniors, to serve folks that were neurodiverse young adults. Um, there was tons of approval by the actual church congregation for this project. They wanted to create an integrated community within their campus. The surrounding community, though, had a lot of opposition to this. It was surrounded by a few single-family neighborhoods, and so there was a plan to kind of build a few single-family homes within the development as a buffer between those single-family neighborhoods. I mean, despite the overwhelming approval from the church congregation, and this is a rendering of what the development would look like in some of the site plans. Despite this project did not move through. The local community voiced very strong opposition to this. All the NIMBY points are not in my backyard. Um, Arguments that was mentioned earlier. And this is typically what happens when you're trying to move into communities and do development in communities that there's not a lot of affordable development there. There is a lot of opposition. So political will is going to be one of the most powerful local levers that you can have to affordability. You can have all the funding in the world. You can even have some of the regulatory, processes in place, but you still need political will because unfortunately there will be opposition. And I think this is an opportunity for you all as engaged citizens to think about how you're showing up in your communities, how you're working to educate neighbors around the need for this issue, to help demystify this and using some of the data that's available, and just being courageous enough to, say that I was able to move into this neighborhood and no one had opposition to that, and so why should we, um, why should we prevent someone else from having that same opportunity? So, does anyone have any questions? I think we're going to move to lunch next. Is that correct? Yes.
So, I would say, like, I guess have affordable housing, like the time about my house is the grant, and we wanted to really tedious process because so much people are like that year we're looking right now, and I work with outside community housing, but I guess it's kind of odd. I'm curious about is like the lead you get in some cases you get a lead in your house. It's like a right you get you pay for right to don't leave your house for certain amount of years. Is that why? Is that like to help you preserve your home ownership, or that's to manage like selling that house immediately, or like I've never really understood that because I was very blind.
Granted, you can answer that.
Yeah, so
um, usually they are going into that home because of all of the down payment assistance and in some cases construction subsidies that we also utilize, with anywhere from $25,000 to $100,000 in equity in that home. Just to give that, and most of the nonprofit programs are targeted for first-time homebuyers. So we're helping people to make that first step into homeownership. And generally, if you have $25,000 to $100,000, you could buy a house wherever you want to, but they don't. So we're asking people to stay long term and be a part of the solution in helping that neighborhood stabilize and to invest in that community. And I think generally the way they work is 10 years, it used to be 20 years, but now it's 10 years. So for every year you stay in the house, it goes in initially as a loan, but on a pro rata basis, every year a tenth of it is forgiven and it turns into a grant. So if you stay for 10 years, you will not have to pay anything back. When if you sell beforehand, let's say you get a job that's bringing food, and there's a whole formula that's figured out, and at the time of the transaction, some of that subsidy stays so that you can sell to another rural buyer. It's a time to give a longevity of affordability and for people to be vested in the community where they're buying because of all the help that they're getting. We have the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust. We'll probably talk about that a little bit later. It's a different model where the land is owned by the land trust. It's bifurcated, and the home buyer owns the work construction, and that's affordable for forever that way. But with the model that you're talking about, it's one and done. So if someone, 10 years later wants to sell their house, it's out of the affordable inventory. And that's a good thing. I don't have any problems with that because that's what we all want when we buy a house is to build equity. And you can use that equity to start a business, send your kids to college or retirement. All of that is good. But in exchange for that grant that you're getting, we're asking you to commit to the community for an extended period of time.
Yep.
On the north side, which is going on real estate market, what is interesting about families was they've been there for generations. As the case with my next door neighbor, and the grandmother just passed away months ago, and they had a reverse mortgage, which I don't understand or do anything about. It's kind of predatory, or I could be misunderstanding that. But basically, now her daughter and granddaughter have to get out of the house ASAP. I don't think you're going to make any money on that house, which again, they grew up in the house. It should be a source of generational wealth. It just feels like it's going to get ripped up from underneath them, even though I guess her mom's not going for it. But meanwhile, the house across the street are selling for $500,000. Is this a larger problem? And if it is, again, I don't really understand that it needs to be done to address this.
So there's a local organization, Housing Opportunities Made Equal, and some others who have housing certified counselors who can help guide folks in those situations through that to understand more about things like reverse mortgages because there's a lot of misinformation around them. There can be predatory practices around them. Usually, if it's a case where there's a lot of seniors who are, let's say, asset rich and cash poor, and so maybe they need some liquidity to use for whatever reason it might be, and they turn to reverse mortgage because you're basically drawing down the equity of the home. And yeah, so I mean that's why they're in that situation.
So I would say that product has been around for a long time, and it used to be
retired, and now you might be having as much monthly income coming in, and your health insurance is skyrocketing, and real estate prices are going up, and you just don't have enough money to cover your monthly bills. You can tap into that equity and then negotiate a portion of equity as pushing down going. So if you have $100,000 of equity, you may get $500 of that every month. It comes in as additional income, and it makes your quality of life better. But when there is a title change, and like the grandmothers passed away, the daughter and granddaughter have the option of refinancing their house if they can afford it, whatever's left, because all of that starts to act as a mortgage. Every month, there's a payment to the borrower, the mortgage gets bigger, so they could refinance the house and then pay off the reverse mortgage. That's a possibility if the daughter has the money, if she has good credit, and if she can get approved for a mortgage. It's a good tool if you know what you're getting into, but in more cases than not, especially in lower wealth households, the equity that they should have gets lost generationally. And so I would encourage them to go to home, see if there is a way that they could be approved for a mortgage to pay that off and be able to stay there. That's not a quick process, so time is of the essence because there are a lot of predatory players in that space now.
I think she's working with some organizations, I'm not sure exactly, but she told me the amount of money it would take for her to do that, and it was like an astronomical.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily a great product for everyone. For some households it is, but if you don't know what you're getting into, you can quickly lose that asset.
Can you expand a little more on restricted housing? Because I guess the way I understand it is like, whichever apartment is the area around it that consumer rent, if that new rent will go really big, really rent, right? Or like, how does that necessarily work? Like, who determines that? It's like a city person income restricted apartment, who determines that?
So that goes back to the, and I can flip back to the continuum, but that goes back to the AMI that's set by HUD annually, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So they set that on an annual basis, and that's what most affordable projects, their funding is tied to that income guideline. So an income restricted unit means that, let's say it's restricted to 70% of area median income. If you earn that, then you can qualify for that. If you earn any more than that, you don't qualify for that unit. But the difference between income restricted and income based is that income based units, they're going to look at your income, and whatever your income is, let's say your income monthly is $1,200. You won't pay more than 30% of your income. Your rent won't be more than 30% of your income. So that's why, and that's really going to be like public housing is income based, for example. So you can have people that make $1,400 a month, and their rent will be based on 30% of their income. Some people that make, let's say, $400 a month, and their rent is based on 30% of their income. Whereas income restricted doesn't take into account whether you could be clustered in an income restricted unit, for example. You qualify, but you could be paying upwards of 30-40% of your income. So that's the difference, and it's set by HUD. And then Virginia Housing is usually the organization that ensures compliance with that income restriction, and that the people that are living there are actually complying with it.
We have 3 income restricted properties here for seniors. So we have some seniors that are paying $150 a month for rent because it's based on their income. Those are hard properties to manage because the expenses of everything is going up, and it's subsidized by the but they put real capital on our expenses.
And then on our federal income, Virginia Housing sets the maximum rents based on household size and area median income. And at Federal Housing Coalition, we have dates inside our organization. We don't, on any of our properties, we don't charge the maximum rents. Because I'm embarrassed to say what our rents are. They're affordable compared to market rate, but we don't push the rents as high as we could because of the mission that we have, to serve, working households. But it's getting harder and harder as everything is more expensive to operate these properties. Our margins are getting uncomfortably thin, and so we may have to raise rents more, which are allowed in order to cover our costs. So it's not a, I'm walking in the grassroots level store. It's rare that I step back and see this data that John and Javon did, and I'm trying to be excited with the data, but it looks a little daunting because we're just out here working so hard to deliver more units. But it is a tough enabling environment for us to do this work right now, even though we are committed and have had some successes. The broader ecosystem has got to change to support organizations like ours and to encourage the private sector to be a part of the solution as well too. I'm thinking I need an adult beverage after listening to all this. So.
Any other questions? Right. Right. Yes. Yeah.
Obviously, it's a lot of varying reasons, but
Those are typically going to be if there's a development that's been affordable for quite some time and it no longer has to. It's no longer required to meet its contract. Yeah. So you can choose to sell or convert to market rate if you choose to, and then the rents go up. So. Yeah.
then after 15 years or 30 years, we have so many outside investors that are coming in and saying, we get calls weekly with outside investors. We have even had international investors wanting to come and place their capital in the U.S. real estate market to buy our units. And so you can get, probably pre-pandemic, we could buy an existing property that was not great for maybe $35,000 a unit. That was typical. That same unit today is selling for over $100,000 a unit. And we have tried to acquire some of those properties that are no longer affordable, but we can't compete because the owners are saying, this is my window of opportunity to make money. And so I could keep it affordable and sell for BAC and not make nearly as much money as I want to, or I can take care of my family and sell and make it then. And that's where we're losing those 1,600. And there are a lot more affordable communities that are gearing up in the next decade to come out of tax credit fines and utility costs to the inventory.
So a lot of those early projects that started at the beginning of that program are now beginning to reach the end of their affordability period.
So, I mean, it almost sounds like there should be some way that there can be some kind of permanent ownership for your organization in those affordable dwelling units so that they don't live out of the system. And I would say most nonprofits don't want to bring it into it. We
And again, we live in a commonwealth and we live in a country where capitalism is the underpinning of how we grow. And so people don't like other people telling them what they can do with their property. And so I'm not 100% sure what the answer is, but generally nonprofits hold most of the affordable inventory in the country, and we tend to, when every 15 years, when it comes out of compliance, we re-up for another 15 years, and so we're trying to meet the long-term need. And somehow we've got to incentivize, and Laura and I argue over this, or mandate the private sector to be part of the solution, because there isn't enough economic capacity to meet the growing need that's happening not only here, but across the country.
So we were planning on over lunch having you all kind of deliberate over the case study, and I think just recognizing how much information we just threw at you for the last 2 hours, we decided against that. But I think more so just to be thinking of some of the takeaways from this morning and the questions that you'd like us to wrestle with during the panel at 1 o'clock would probably be the most helpful. So, does that sound good? Thank you.
And then even things like the war on drugs. And I know this group doesn't know anything about the details of illicit drug activity, but crack is almost the exact same thing as cocaine. But crack is cheaper, and in the 1990s, when I moved here, early 1990s, and Richmond was the murder capital of the country at that time, because we were right in the center between New York and Miami, and we were a midway point for drug trafficking. And if you were black and you were using crack, that you went to jail. If you were white and affluent and using cocaine, you were sent to a rehab center. And it was looked at, drug usage was not looked at as a disease, it was looked at as a crime. And so you were put in jail. And once you have a criminal background and history, your whole life changes and becomes much more tough. Now, when you're looking at the opioid epidemic, a lot of that is happening in white America. And that is seen as a health crisis, not a crime. So it's a whole lot of stuff that's going on. Not one thing, but a lot of things. And cumulatively, when you see the numbers that Javon showed, the disparities, this in part, along with our economic, markets, that's why we're seeing some of this. So Javon had a different version of this spectrum around who needs affordable housing. Well, we all do. I don't care if you're a multi-millionaire, you need a home that you can afford, right? And so the issue, the challenge is that it's not just the housing. We want to give people a quality roof over their head, but the lower your income, the higher your needs. Because when you're impoverished, you just don't have one issue, you have a lot of issues that you're struggling with. So in the nonprofit sector, we provide housing, but we also provide services to people to help them to thrive, and when life happens, to be able to help them get back on track and to live their best lives. So, and Sherry mentioned this as well, and I think when I look at the numbers, I got to update them from Javon's numbers here, so we're all saying the same thing. But, because in the nonprofit sector we're competing for philanthropic dollars, I think we're getting better at this, but we used to say, well, quality health is more important than quality education, is more important than a living wage, career ladder employment, and it's not. We all need all of those things. And I will admit that I'm biased, that if you don't know where you're going to lay your head at night, it's hard to pursue those other things. So it's not more important than these other aspects of what a good quality life is made up of. But you have to have that because it's so basic and foundational in order for your success to move forward. So I'm going to give a elementary economics on how we do what we do. And so, when we talk about affordable housing, our apartments cost the exact same things as the luxury apartments in Scott's Addition or wherever they may be going up. Because a brick costs the same for a market rate developer or me, or a 2x4, the material costs are the same, the labor costs are the same, the land costs are the same. And so it's really how we finance it makes all the world a difference. And so a typical market developer, when you see the cranes up in our region, they're going to have a lot of debt. They go to a bank, borrow the money, and then they have private equity investors who are getting really nice returns. I wish I had more cash to invest in that because these guys are getting double-digit returns. They build the building, they stabilize the building, and then they flip it and sell the building, and everybody makes a lot of money. They pay back the lender, they pay back the private equity investors, and they profit the money and move on to the next development. Well, our capital stack is such that our rents are 50 to 70% off the market rate. So how do we do that? We keep our debt really, really low. We try to keep it, now it's probably hovering closer to 30, 35%, just because the costs have gone up. We do the low-income housing tax credit equity, and then Sherry usually runs in the opposite direction when she sees me because I'm always begging for money from anybody to fill the last piece. But instead of having 90% mortgage on my buildings, we have 20% of mortgage costs. And that's how we can offer much, much lower rents. And then we hold on to our properties long term. We've been around 35 years, and we still have most of our portfolio that we started with. So the longer we can hold on to the properties, the more people we can serve. So I just wanted to show, the rest of these are just pictures. I wanted to show you, we love having vision. And people think we're crazy. And we paid about $800,000 for a building that looked like this, that we had to put hazmat suits on because people were living in there for years, and there was just toxic waste everywhere. And there had been a fire because people were trying to stay warm, and the roof came in. And yet this was the day that we took the staff there and said, look what we're going to buy. And they were like, okay, you have lost your mind. But that's okay. And we turned it into that. And so I happened to be taking a donor through a tour at the time that one of our leasing associates was leasing an apartment to a father of 2 young boys. And he started crying as he was looking at the apartment. And that's because he was moving from Creighton public housing. And if you've never been in a public housing unit, you know what cinder blocks are that you see on the outside of a house? That's the inside wall of most public housing, cinder blocks. They don't have air conditioning, they don't have washer dryers. He was the suspect. And he just said, I get to raise my boys in a place like this that has a full stackable washer dryer, has a thermostat where he can control the heat and cooling, and we have services there to help him and his sons, reach their success as they define it. It's little things that a lot of us take for granted that a lot of people don't have access to. Oh, wait a minute, let me go back. One other thing. We fought for 2 years to get the zoning on this. 2 years, a lot of new people moving into Churchill, homeowners across the street, and you saw what this looks like. This was their neighbor across the street, and we were going to pour $20 million to get this, and they fought us tooth and nail, and thank goodness we had an elected official who stayed with us to get the zoning that was necessary to deliver this. And
We
one
got,
of
we got kicked out of a community, remember that?
Oh, I do.
That evening, we got.
Laura was my board chair at the time, and she got really upset with me because we were having a community meeting, trying to explain what we were going to do. Someone said that we were, they said we were going to bring drugs and crime. This
We were
is
building a
what-
slave ship.
a slave ship, that was one of the comments as well too. So they were talking about our residents who they didn't know like they were dogs. This is 2016. And I got up and walked out of the meeting. I rarely do that, but I was just so frustrated. So when I told her, she said, Greta, you can't do this. You have to stay in the meeting. So she said, I'm going to go with you to the next meeting, which she did, and then we both got up. It was terrible. It was terrible. But we had an elected official we stood with her, and she was courageous enough to do the right thing. That looks lovely. That was back in 1989. And when something sounds too good to be true, maybe it is. My predecessor, T.K. Somino, who's a dear friend, bought this property from HUD. Guess how much? 500 units that looked just like that. $10. $10. It had gone into foreclosure. And this is in Chesterfield County. And at that time, again, late 80s, early 90s, Chesterfield County police were getting 1,000 911 calls a year from this one property with all of the illicit activities that were going on there. There are over 600 kids under age 18 that were living in conditions like this. And his vision and a lot of partnerships and a lot of hard work has turned into this, which is a mixed income, mixed use community, 60 acres. We've added more land, and it has a daycare center, it has a health clinic, we have community centers. It's beautiful, and that's almost 30 years old now, and we're just opening up a new 160-unit family subdivision adjacent to this. This is affordable housing in the FAN, senior housing. This is affordable housing in Henrico County, senior housing. This is homeownership. We got to switch up our pictures, Javon. We got a lot of the same. We got lots of pictures. This is the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust home. These are some of the things that we're working on right now. In Richmond, more homeownership. Chesterfield, that's that 160-unit development with all of the smaller buildings. We're about to close on a deal in Henrico. We have an old Green Book Motel site in Chester, which is going to be really cool. That's the one down here in the lower right, which we're excited. And I'm looking at Sherry. We only have a little bit of a gap. We just need to raise that last little bit of money. We'll get that one under construction. And then the one in the lower left corner is a really unique partnership. Better Housing Coalition bought 35 acres, some former public housing land in Northside and Highland Park from Richmond Redevelopment and Housing Authority, 35 acres. We've hustled for 2.5 years to get $16 million from the city of Richmond. If you go to Dove Street in Highland Park, you'll see heavy equipment and dirt is finally moving for 125-unit homeownership subdivision. We're going to develop the land. We're bringing in water, sewer, streets, curbs, sidewalks, and parks. And then we are partnering with the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust, Project Homes, Habitat, and a private sector builder. And we'll have a mixed income homeownership subdivision that will be 5 minutes from downtown, which will be free. So if you have folks that are looking to buy a house, probably a year from now, we'll have lots of different homes that are available across different price points. So why do we do this work? I'm not a native of Richmond, but this is home now. And we just think, I want this community to be good for everyone. And so working with Javon and the Partnership for Housing Affordability, we have this regional framework. And what do we want to see happen? We want mixed income, mixed use communities to happen. We want inclusive homeownership, housing options for seniors. We saw that the senior population is going to, thank goodness I'm a senior, we're going to be here for a while. So we wanted to make sure that we take care of our seniors. We want to transform thoughtfully public housing and mobile home communities in a powerful way, and repurposing land and buildings to do affordable housing. The commercial market really hasn't hit Richmond yet, but in certain areas, you know, office buildings are empty and they're being converted to affordable housing. There are shopping centers that are underperforming. They have land and utilities, convert that to housing. We're having interesting conversations with the faith community. There are lots of churches in the Richmond region. Many of them have shrinking congregations and they can't afford to keep their buildings up. So there are some conversions that are happening from faith communities to affordable housing. So there are all sorts of interesting opportunities for us to work differently together going forward. And when we talk about what you guys can do, stand with us. There's a lot of advocacy, because when we get into the panel, we're going to be talking about policy changes, and their elected officials want to see a volume of letters, emails, texts, and stand with us when we're advocating for policies that will be good for all. For those with resources, this stuff costs a lot. Since before the pandemic, we could deliver a typical unit of affordable housing for maybe $160,000 a unit. It's now topping $300,000 a unit. And those numbers aren't going to come down, so the costs have big gaps in them, and we got to figure out different ways, but capital is important. As everyone has said, this is not quick fix stuff. It's going to take some time. So unfortunately, some of our policies are built around 4-year elected terms, and this is 10, 15, 20, 25 years, because it's taken decades and generations to create the conditions that we're dealing with today. And then go to Javon's website and get involved with him, because we all have to be in the same boat and rowing in the same direction to have a different outcome for our community. So I think that's it, and now we can just have a conversation.
Great. So if you want to check out the partnership's website, that's bajrva.com, and there is just a plethora of data on that site. If ever you're engaged in advocacy, we would love for everyone to be engaged in advocacy with us. If you need data, that is the preeminent site where you can gather the data that's specific to localities or specific to either the rental or home ownership market. Thank you, Greta. I think it's always important for us to do a little show and tell. We used to put people on vans and run around the region and show them physically a lot of the affordable housing product, but this is a little faster, more efficient way to do it. I wanted to step back. We are going to spend most of our time talking about solutions and how you all can be part of the solutions. But I do want to ask Greta and Javon to identify, maybe if you had to say, the top 2 or 3 impediments for our ability to take our housing conversation from transactional to transformational. Because that's really what it's going to take. Greta talks about scale, and we do a lot of transactions, but those transactions need to lead towards transformation. So what are the 2 or 3 biggest hurdles that we will need to overcome?
I'd say land use is a biggie, where every time we have to go in for rezoning, so if something is zoned for single family, we have to upscale. It doesn't even matter, because we bought industrial sites and we down zone, but the process is still the same. You have to go to the public, and that's where we start to see opposition. BHC's been doing this work for 35 years, and we have not had one development where we didn't have opposition for the work that we've done. Sometimes we've been able to overcome that, and sometimes that NIMBY case that Javon showcased, that was us. and it didn't happen. So land use and making it easier and by right so that, that usually takes a couple of years to get through a zoning process, and it also costs with the attorneys. That adds another $100,000 or more to the overall cost of a development. So land use by right would be helpful. Capital would be helpful because since the pandemic, the cost of talent and labor has gone up just in our organization by 30%. That's not coming down. The cost of materials have gone up. The cost of land has gone up. Real estate taxes have gone up. Insurance, if you can get it, property insurance is really, really expensive, and that's growing by high double digits, like 30% increases annually because of climate change and the fires and floods and hurricanes that we're seeing across the globe. And so the cost to deliver a unit of housing is crazy expensive. It doesn't make sense, plus all of the regulatory things that we have to do that the private sector doesn't. And that's fine because we want to deliver a quality product, but we're going to need some more than likely public sector resources in order to fill these growing gaps in order to serve the lower segment of our society. And then the last thing that I would say is whether it's political will or just how do we lift up our humanity to care, whether you're an elected official, a corporate CEO, Joe Blow on the street in the neighborhood, how do we help people care enough to be willing to help their neighbor have a better quality of life? And that's a more values-based reflection that we all have to do. I think one of the speakers at the PHA State of Housing event stated that, and I'm a Democrat, moderate Democrat, that, and this is a bipartisan issue, housing is, and we have to work gingerly to keep both sides of the aisle happy as we move forward. But we get more pushback from more progressive neighborhoods when we ask for a zoning variance, which is surprising, but I think it goes to Mickey's point. People invest in their home, they want to see it grow in value, and so that people are torn sometimes around, I don't want to hurt my well-being in order to help somebody else. And I think there have been enough studies, John can confirm that if done well, if it's good design, good quality construction, good resident selection, good management, then affordable housing is an asset to a community, not a detriment. But most people don't believe that. And so we've got to figure out how we embrace all of our neighbors doing better, that we all do better when we all do better. That philosophy.
So Brett hit most of them, and I think, which is great because it's really the shift away from incrementalism at the local and regional level. Housing's kind of been an afterthought. The public spending, public priority, and other communities have demonstrated if you're going to go big, you really have to on housing. We're not going to make a drop in the bucket, with the continued investments are just going to continue as well with this trend of having 40,000 units deficit. And so we've seen other communities, they've committed a lot of public dollars, local level, regional level, and then at the state level, and we haven't done that in a coordinated way. So policy, political will, and having the funding, and all of that will create an environment where private sectors are more incentivized to be involved in this. Because right now, it just doesn't make any sense. To do work that is more complicated, you're not going to get as big of a return. You can just do a lot better market rate right now. So there's just fewer regulatory frameworks that we have in place. Other states have some advantages over us in that, but there has to be bigger public commitments. So most of our local governments, for example, Ranco, City of Richmond, Chesterfield, they get entitlement funding from the federal government. They use that to go towards housing. Very little of actual local dollars that's in the general budget will go towards housing. That's kind of a given in a lot of other communities where they have dedicated sources of revenue towards housing, where they have large trust funds toward housing. And we just haven't gotten to that point here in the region. We're working to do that. And I think there's more willingness now than there has been. But that's what's going to be required, because otherwise we'll just continue to fight a losing battle in that sense.
I think, one,
DC has put like, what is it, 300 million into their fund, or Philadelphia has done that.
Yeah, I think it's $100 million a year that DC is putting into their housing trust fund, and ours is 10 in the city. We don't have them in Henrico and Chesterfield. And just as comparison, Florida, not a big Florida fan, but Florida did a comprehensive housing agenda maybe 2 years ago, $1 billion of combined resources for workforce and affordable housing. And we just had I would say a setback at the General Assembly that we had level funding at $150 million for the entire Commonwealth of Virginia, which is anemic. All of our resources are anemic right now.
The other thing I would say is that the difference between the federal dollars that flow through localities is there are a lot more strings attached to that, and you can only help certain segments of the population. So if you cannot help somebody over 80% of AMI.
Correct.
So I think when I was on the BHC board, we had a teacher that was going to purchase one of our homes, and she got a very modest raise, but it kicked her over 80%, and we weren't able to sell that home.
By $1,500, she was over the income limit, so we couldn't work with her.
So the reason we need, and we're advocating for local dollars that are like general fund dollars, is they don't have the strings attached. And so it's much more flexible how you can utilize that funding. And so that's one of the things that we are advocating for. And we are starting to see some movement in that direction. And I think Javon mentioned that the Partnership for Housing Affordability was granted, our planning district was granted $3 million by Virginia Housing. $3 million, we were asked to do 36 units over 3 years because of the work of Greta, who was on the board at the time, and Javon and some others. We set up a system, and we're going to do, 270 units roughly with that $3 million. So there's a creative community here who really knows how to leverage dollars for good, but we need not 3 million, we need 300 million. And that's not even going to do it. So anyway, let's talk about, we've talked about NIMBYism as one of the challenges, which is real. So people can become Yes in My Backyard. There actually are YIMBY chapters now. And we have one here. So I would encourage people to check that out if you want to be supportive. I will also recommend another book called The Sum of Us, which really talks about, look, scarcity is a myth, abundance is the reality. But it's about recognizing that this is not a zero-sum game. Javon can get his, and I can have mine too. As long as we think it's a zero-sum game, and if Javon gets his, somehow I can't participate in an American dream, if that is our dream. That's false, and we have to push back against false narratives. So let's talk about other solutions. Let's talk about maybe policy solutions, a couple of policy solutions. I know which one Greta's going to say, so we're going to let Javon go first.
Okay.
So I'll just follow up on the conversation around NIMBY. There's a growing movement across the country right now around churches and what involvement they can have in this space. And so instead of YIMBY, instead of NIMBY, it's yes in God's backyard. So the notion is that churches have a lot of influence, and they also have, in most cases, a lot of land that they can take advantage of. And if they're enabled by zoning or legislation to build by right residential units on their property, that's what a lot of churches want to do. There's tremendous examples around the country of where that's taken place. And I think that there's growing interest. Greta and I just spoke to a large community of faith-based leaders here in Richmond and Hampton Roads, and this is something that a lot of faith leaders are focusing on. There was a bill at the General Assembly that was, I think it was pushed to be studied further at the Housing Commission around faith and housing, which would essentially allow churches to, by right, be able to develop affordable housing on their properties. So that would be huge if that could get passed because they're wonderful partners. They're also, as I understand it, they're not taxed properties either. So that's something that can be done. And again, we're in Virginia, so we have to operate within the legislative framework here, which means we're Dillon Rural State. If there are things that aren't enabled by the state General Assembly and state code, then you can't do them at the local level. So we do bump into that sometimes, and that creates some challenges in what we're able to do locally, not as empowered to do things at the local level. But nonetheless, there have been a ton of housing bills in recent years, mainly landlord-tenant, that have gotten through and some others. And I think we'll continue to see that. I think there's more recognition around the connection between economic development and housing. You'll hear the governor talk about that quite a bit. So that there are some pathways politically where housing can be, couched as economic development or as, business and workforce, because it is. And, sometimes that's what it takes to advance a little on the policy level. So I think more so locally, looking at land, some jurisdictions, what they've done is they've essentially said if there's going to be any fire station or police station or library that gets built, they're going to assess the feasibility of building affordable housing on that land as well. So anytime you go through the capital improvement process locally to build these, larger scale public buildings, they're also figuring out if housing can accompany that. And so local governments can look at how they're using the land that they own, and if they can prioritize that for affordable housing, they can, provide it to developers at a discounted rate, for example. And land costs, Greta can tell you how significant land costs are to development. So there's a lot of things that at the local level you can do to address this from a policy standpoint. Zoning is going to be usually the most powerful lever, though.
Couple of other things. Some communities like Philadelphia and even New Orleans after Katrina have put policies in place that protect longer term, more than likely lower income neighbors through the market gentrification that's happening all over this country. And so if you've been a long tenured resident of a certain income segment, that you get breaks on your real estate taxes and things of that nature to be able to ensure that you get to stay in the community as a neighborhood or whole community is starting an upward mobility trajectory. And what that, for localities, their biggest revenue stream is real estate taxes. So that's a big deal when a city or community decides we're going to take less in real estate taxes because for this segment, we aren't going to charge them what the market rate is so that they can stay and be a part of the new community that is unfolding. And when you think of a place like New Orleans, or I used to live in Philadelphia before I moved here. It's some of the lower income citizens that are part of your artist community, your food community, they create the culture. And if you aren't careful, those folks will be pushed out. And you can look at examples like Austin or fastly becoming Nashville and Charlotte. You can look at Portland and Seattle, and the folks who made those communities unique have gotten completely pushed out of those cities. And then you look like every other city, and Richmond is too special to look like Nashville or Charlotte and all that. I don't want to be that. But you have to be intentional in making sure that everyone gets to stay and be a part of the better version of Richmond. So, but that's a policy thing at the local level where cities and counties are desperate for revenues coming in to provide quality services like schools and fire and police and roads and potholes and all that kind of stuff. So it's a balancing act. And then the other one, which is my favorite, which I would like to think that I have influenced or I wore Laura Lafayette down, because initially we were on opposite ends of the spectrum, but now I think you agree with me. Okay, that inclusionary zoning has to be in our toolbox here in Virginia. Charlottesville and Northern Virginia already have it, but because we're a Dillon Rule state, each locality has to go to the General Assembly and ask for that. And what inclusionary zoning really results in is that every development, whether it's residential or commercial, like think about the Dominion Tower that went on, or the CoStar Tower that's going up now, there would be a mandate that either you had to include affordable housing in your future development, or there's a formula for figuring out a certain dollar amount that would go into the housing trust fund for those of us who are doing affordable housing, so we would have resources in order to do it. We fought back and forth with the home builders and some other folks who didn't want that mandate to come down. We tried incentivizing it. That didn't work because people can make too much money right now. So why would you? And so I think in order to harness the power and scale of the private sector, inclusionary zoning for the RVA region, not just Richmond, but the region, needs to be put in place so that we have either more financial resources or more units that would give people choice. So if you're doing all of the development that's happening out Short Pump, actually further west than Short Point, Short Pump. Every time I go out there, I don't go often, but when I go, it's like, my gosh, we're going to be in Charlottesville pretty soon. But as that area is growing, not one unit of affordable housing, not one. Scott's Addition, we tried and got sued trying to do a development. Laura, you on the board? She was chair. I made her go through hell when she was my board chair. We tried, got sued, didn't do it. But Scott's Addition, as vibrant as it is, it's so cool. Not one unit of affordable housing. It's crazy.
To change that, because a lot of our hearing is education. So I think if the public were really educated on exactly what it means, I think their tune would change slightly if we understood that there were police, we were talking about this, healthcare workers, food.
Yeah, I think we have more education to do. And I don't know, go back to something I said previously. Race is still a big piece of the challenge that we have to overcome. Like, who needs affordable housing? So we can educate folks that, yes, nurses, police officers, firefighters, and that seems to be acceptable somewhat. But also public housing residents want a better quality of life. And so it's not just some that are acceptable. You remember when Housing Virginia, no, it wasn't Housing Virginia. Yeah, what was the marketing group? Housing Virginia? Yes.
Housing.
Housing Virginia. And when that was first being formed, and this was a marketing effort, I don't know, 15 years ago. And the first brochure they did, they only had white people on the brochure. These guys need affordable housing. And I was like, okay, you can do that, but that's not where the pushback. People are scared. And because we hear it all the time. we don't want those people. The comments out when we were trying to do the short pump deal was we don't want Gilpin Court in short pump. So again, we as a community, as individuals, as human beings have to look ourselves in the mirror. Are, are we the holdup in letting all of our neighbors, it doesn't matter what your color is, what your socioeconomic status is, are we willing to help all of our neighbors thrive? And when they do better, we do better as a community. And so we can educate elected officials, and then our government is bizarro because the General Assembly is dominated by suburban and rural legislators who just hear big sucking sound when urban and urbanizing areas come for requests like inclusionary zoning here in the RVA region. So it's education, and then we need a volume of people. It's not, Laura and I can go there and talk to, we're blue in the face, but we need everybody to come and be standing together. Corporate, elected officials, everybody standing together in volume to say, we need this for our community. We want this for our community. We demand it for our community so that all of our neighbors can be their best selves.
Yeah, I'm not, we founded PHA 20 years ago, and we're still having to educate. And I'm not as, I guess the way I look at it is if we could have created incentives for the developers to do what we want them to do, which is having economically inclusive communities, we would have more economically inclusive communities. But we have not been able to create a formula. In fact, the General Assembly passed a bill, I think it was 2019, with a laundry list of incentives if you had like 150 units and if you would set aside 15, you'd get all these benefits. Last time I checked, not one locality in the Commonwealth had passed an ordinance that they were enabled to do. So the argument for mandatory inclusionary zoning is it's been done elsewhere in this country. The sky has not fallen. Developers have not gone out of business. The difference is the margin might go from here to here, but it's still going to be a healthy margin. Even in the nonprofit sector, so for Maggie Walker Community Land Trust, we're doing 22 townhomes in Henrico. Half of them are going to be market rate, so we can subsidize the other 11. So it can be done, and we're not going to lose money, right? Greta's not in the business of wanting to lose money. We're not in Maggie Walker either. So the private sector has to get in the game because it's the only way we can respond to scale. And think about, you mentioned short pump. If you get behind a school bus where all those apartments are, good luck, you're going to sit there for a while, right? All those apartments west of Short Pump, there's, I don't know, thousands. What if we had set aside 10%, 15%? And where would those young people be going to high school? Deep Run High School. And what did I say earlier? The difference between and it's not right, but the difference between the AP opportunities at Deep Run are very different from the AP opportunities at Verona High. You can go back this week and listen to Tyrone Nelson, the chair of the board, begging his school superintendent to pay some attention to the schools in Eastern Henrico. So the point is, we talk about the intersection of jobs and education and housing, and I have become convinced over the years that the private sector is not going to do it unless they are required to do it, and they can still do right and do well. And in 2026, I think we have an opportunity. But elections have consequences, so we shall see. But I think in 2026, we have an opportunity.
And I am optimistic about one other aspect, and that's the business community. Finally, the light bulb is going on that they need to pay attention to housing. That's been a long slug of education as well. And I'll just tell a story. This past summer, after 6 months of waiting to get on his schedule, we got the CEO of Altria to spend a half a day with us on a bus. And we had his whole C-suite entourage with us, which was great. I had a couple of board members, some staff, and we took them on a tour to show them our work, and which was great. And we had a armed security detail that followed the bus, which that was a first for me. I'd never had that, but I felt very safe going through our neighborhoods. And the CEO super engaged the whole time. You know, he wasn't on his phone, and he was really engaged in asking great questions. And he said, how many Altria employees would be eligible to live in your community? And I think I said, probably none, because even the lowest wage Altria employee makes more money than would qualify to live with us, which is a great thing. It's a great company that has done well by its employees and shareholders. And I said, but every one of your employees' quality of life is enhanced by people who live in our community. So whoever's taking care of their children while they're at work, who's ever helping them to take care of their elderly parents while they're at work, who's cutting their grass, who's cleaning their home, who's cleaning their office, who is making wonderful meals at all of the local restaurants, who is playing in the band when you want to go out Friday night and hear music, the folks who are organizing various art events around town. All of that culture and the essence of what makes RVA so wonderful, those folks are living with us. And so if they're gone, what does that do to your employees' quality of life as well, too? So it's that big tent that John is talking about that we need to, and we can do things better to make sure that we all get to benefit from the great things that people are now discovering, that RVA is a great place to live, work, and play. But it won't be if we don't put some critical policies and shifts in place sooner than later. Because right now, the market, if you aren't careful, the genie is coming out of the bottle. And once she's out of the bottle, it's hard to stuff it back in with policies and stuff like that.
And none of what we're talking about is unprecedented. I mean, companies across the state, across the country have made big splashes in housing. Amazon with their HQ2 in Northern Virginia spent a lot of money in affordable housing, understanding the impacts that development is going to have for the area. There have been numerous companies who have moved to places where they have new factories or distribution plants, and they realize when they get there, their workers have nowhere to live. And then they take it upon themselves to invest in housing, sell, work, negotiate with developers to ensure that the housing that gets built is for their workforce. So we're not talking about things that haven't happened elsewhere. We're just trying to see if we can get some of that momentum here in Richmond.
John?
Yeah. Tactic that I've seen put in place by some cities, which is to do a public referendum or bond, and to raise a whole bunch of money to a bond. Not Charlotte doing effectively, and because the young elected city councilman, there was a whole suite of millennials that came in, and they went to the business leaders and said, "We need you to put up $75 million, and we're going to do a referendum bond, and we're going to raise the same amount. We want you to be there to match it." And they did it. And it was just an amazing play. I wonder, do you guys see that around the country as another method, and could it ever happen here?
We were talking about that this week, actually. The
Yep,
three
we
of
had-
us were in a room this week with some other folks talking about
With
that.
attorneys trying
Yes,
to
with
map it
attorneys.
out.
But what I would say, John, is we've had, well, Henrico's and Chesterfield both have done 2 different bond packages in the last 8 years, something like that. And it's always schools, public safety, parks and rec, and there's nothing wrong with any of those. But they have been very clear, at least those 2 jurisdictions, that they are not going to put housing in a bond and put it before the electorate. They're just not going to do it. On the other hand, the mayor has said $10 million a year for 5 years. Now, he truly can't encumber the next administration, but we haven't talked to anybody that's running for council or mayor that isn't supportive of housing as a priority. Um, but I'll let Greta speak to this about, you know, there's a lot of money out there that is loan funds and not grant money. So you want to speak to what we need, Greta?
Yeah, so there's social impact investing that a lot of folks are looking at, and I think Sherry has looked at it, and it's low interest loan capital, but with the cost to deliver housing these days, we're needing large scale grant money. So, and the loan funds are really just not on the upper end, for teachers, police officers, maybe that would work, but for lower income households, that's not going to be helpful. And so I think we are looking at a regional bond issuance. And honestly, we're looking, is there a way of not having to take it to a citizen referendum? Because while people will say, yes, I want my tax dollars to go for schools or community centers and things of that nature, unless we did a masterful job of marketing, I'm not sure that citizens would vote for affordable housing. But other places like the Twin Cities, that they've done it, and people and they've done like $500 million bond issuances for housing. In San Francisco, they did $1 billion bond issuance. And I don't know if we will get there. If we ask, I don't know, would you guys vote for it? Okay, I don't know, maybe we're singing to the choir here, but yeah.
I share a little bit of the research that we picked up along the way. These are exceptionally high schools. Top two box to say this is the number one issue, right? Safe. So I think great marketing could possibly be the difference.
Yeah.
You're already going in really strong. It's not like you got to bring this issue and pull it all in or all these other things. It's at the top.
Yeah.
And so places like Charlotte and Raleigh, where they've had success with that, I think it was upwards of 70% of voters approved it. Yeah, approving it. Kansas City recently had one, as did Columbus, Ohio, and even a lot of smaller areas have done bonding in recent years. So I don't know. You're not optimistic?
Well, maybe we will. I mean, it goes back to that Housing Virginia thing, and I've been a thorn in so many people's sides for such a long time. I wear that with pride. But when they rolled out that, because I think we need to be authentic and say what the issue is. When they rolled out the brochure initially, and we eventually changed it with all white folks on it, I understand why we were doing that, but that's not telling the full story. And I think I'm just too old right now, and I want to be authentic and truthful that we need housing across the entire spectrum of citizens. And so if we can be truthful about it, then I think we go for it. Maybe because we were just trying to skirt citizens, because of the feedback that we've gotten when we go in to do affordable housing in any neighborhood. We've had so much opposition, but maybe, and if it's regional.
A lot of times our politicians, they're told, yeah, go for it. You're not going to win the first time. You're going to get your name recognized. So being able to put more truth and authenticity behind the issue. It's not all wrong. You don't win the first time.
Well, I mean, I will just say, sorry, I'll look for you. So the church example we gave was my church. And when we had the first community meeting, the neighbors were so ugly, the rector said, we won't hold another one of those meetings in this space because it was so virulent, so ugly. To Greta's point about you have to talk about everything in the room, one of the things that the neighbors said was, oh, psst, psst, they're going to run GRTC buses down that neighborhood. Now that's a dog whistle, right? We all know what they were saying. And so when, and I, I have this motto is you have to be people of hope even when there is no good cause for optimism. Because if you don't have a reservoir of hope, you don't do this work. So we can sound cynical perhaps, but we have some scars that we don't make up these. The cynicism comes from experience, but we're still up here. We're still being pains in people's
Yep.
rears
We
because
believe in
we
it.
believe in it.
Yeah, we
Seriously.
believe it. Yeah.
Say though, I get where you guys are because you have been in it a long time. I just feel like, I do feel like the mood has shifted some, the narrative has shifted, and there are still gonna be pockets of people that are not open-minded about what really goes on and what doesn't go on, right? And I think you kind of have to meet people where they are sometimes, but, I do think, we've got younger people coming in that are experiencing, everyone's experiencing different things that they were not experiencing maybe even 10 years ago as it relates to housing, right? It's kind of hitting people across the board, and that's really where I think you have to kind of figure out what's the sweet spot of opportunity to actually go like this and move it. And I think, Greta, to your point, I think we're having more authentic conversations in the region than we've had. Are we 100% yet? No. Or is everybody having them? But there is a better sense of reality around what has held people back versus where we need to be going. So it does feel like, there's just some things. And I know you guys were thinking these things through. But we do have, I think, this opportunity over the next couple of years to test the waters a bit. And we may not win the first time, right? We may not. But how do we do that? And that's part of trying to bring more people to the conversation. I think so you guys aren't the only ones hanging out there because you have been a lot. You've been the people that was all the time part of more because there are experts in that. That's a lot of pressure on somebody, and on people for that. So we've got to.
That's why Javon's here.
And I think to your point, more willingness to take a bigger risk and stand up to some of this. But what I get encouraged about is I love the fact that in some ways newer people, younger people, what's the average age moved into the city now? It's like 26 years old right now. So the younger people coming from other places are going to be helpful in our ability to kind of change some of those things. And so there just might be some opportunities.
Yeah. And I would just say, because what we're sharing with you is factual, and I don't want you to leave downtrodden because we yes, and we have to shake each other every now and then. We keep trying. I don't think we have an option to not or to stop. So we keep trying, and I think the risk tolerance of a community, we're going to have to try some things and be willing to fail and fail fast, learn from that, and get up and try again. And we're thinking about not tiny houses, but much smaller houses to be able to bring the price points down. We're thinking about a whole affordable condominiums, which other parts of the community or country have done. We don't have it here in Richmond. Again, just trying to bring the price points down. So, no, I think we keep striving and we don't give up. No. I'm listening to myself. I was like, oh my God, she's going to jump out of the window. I'm not. It's hard, and that's no joke. It's hard, but we keep trying. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I tad bit disappointed that the city didn't mandate a lot more affordability in that development. There still may be opportunities to pull a lever or two to get more affordability because the whole project is struggling. just because of the higher cost of everything, especially capital. And so, yes, there still may be an opportunity to bring some affordability there. There's also the renewed, don't say Navy Hill 2.0 development, which is the Capital City Center, and the two finalists who are talking about 12 to 1,500 new units of housing where the Coliseum is downtown, can't meet the affordability requirements that the city is having, and both of them have reached out to us. Nobody wants to do affordable housing. And so we'll see if we get the opportunity to do something downtown, which would be great. So, yeah, it could come, it should come. And I mean, there's a large scale owner of land in Scott's Addition or adjacent to Scott's Addition that's doing, I mean, they own so much land and they're doing beautiful development, not, no affordable. We've talked to them. Would you sell a portion of your land so that it can be a mixed income and they're only looking at the bottom line benefit? So I don't, that's why the inclusionary mandate is going to have to be in place in order to get people to play better in the sandbox, I think.
The other thing I would say, and I know we need to wrap it up, is, but this is again how everybody can participate, is we're going to need to hold the city accountable, because the city in the past has created development agreements and then has not kept the feet of the people's feet to the fire. And so, and I'm not going to name names, but there was a corporate citizen that was supposed to do something and didn't, and there wasn't any kind of, accountability. So what I'll be watching for in the Diamond District and also in the city center is whatever's proffered, whatever the developer agrees to, does the developer deliver? I'm concerned about the Diamond because, as Greta said, the numbers have changed so dramatically. But again, as citizens, when real estate deals are constructed where the developer is getting something exceedingly valuable and in return they've promised XYZ, they need to deliver on XYZ. And so we really need to be watching this development and making sure that there's somebody in City Hall or several somebodies holding them accountable.
Yeah, there was a question over there.
I recently heard that a private equity firm bought up like all the Greyhound bus stations, maybe in the country or wherever. But anyway, it applies to the Richmond Greyhound bus station, and they're gonna maybe develop one, but maybe not specifically for those. I know it's wrong, but nonetheless, I'm having what's right there at Scott's Addition. If you want to get affordable housing, they're probably gonna fight you on it. And I mean, private equity is also like buying up homes with cash. I mean,
Yeah.
do we have any way to fight that locally? Is there a push to fight that locally? Like when those big deals go through, do you guys have any like say or notification or anything like that?
I think we're reading the newspaper or social media like everybody else. And no, I think that's local government is aware and they probably control most triggers. But again, we're a capitalistic society. And if people are willing to pay big bucks for it, it's going to sell. There's a community in Henrico, 35 acres. We've been salivating over trying to get our hands on that, but there's 11, maybe $12 million of debt on it, and we can't afford to buy that. We would love to have either philanthropy or local government buy it, and then we would love to be a partner in reimagining that site. But again, and I was talking to Faith back here over lunch, that we're constantly trying to balance our sustainability as a going concern. And I have 85 employees and I have 3,000 residents who live with us. And I have to make sure we keep the doors open with advancing our mission. And that's a hard thing to do. And I can't afford $12 million for land as much as I would like to. And I think we could take the terrible 300 units that are on there and make it 700 or 800 units of wonderful housing. But I can't afford that. So I don't, okay. Well, so I do think that's why this regional bond issuance or something, so if we had that in place, then we could grab the capital, I mean, the land opportunity and do more scale things. So there's going to be some good stuff coming down the pike. It is, and it's just the law of averages. God is maybe not going to make us work this hard, and He's going to give us some grace and glory here soon. I am optimistic about that.
Well, that's an amazing note to speak up here. Wow, this was incredible. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank everybody, excuse me, who showed up today. I learned a long time ago that you can pretend to care, but you can't pretend to show up. And so thank you for being here this morning. It really, really means a lot. I've only been at the university for 3 months, and I've learned really, really quickly that at the university and really at Robbins, we want our students to be a force for good and the change makers. And while they're here with us, for sure, and so for all the students here today, kudos, but really long after you leave us, we want you to be these change makers. And before anybody can be a force or an impact, you have to really deeply understand really complex issues. And so conversations like this give us a base for doing that. And so the value of this is just indescribable. And thank you so much for setting us up to be the change makers. This is what we want for ourselves. We want to inspire and to be change makers. So this is a very important piece of that. We really appreciate it. So thank you all for coming. I loved that, how you can help. I think, my biggest question to you, and I'd love to even give you time to think about this and get back to me, is if none of our MBAs ever took a job in nonprofit, if they end up being analysts or company CEOs, still, what's their part in this and what can we do? That's what we want to know. Those are the stories we want to tell. So think about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to know the answers to that. But thank you all for being here. Truly appreciate it. Let's give her a round of applause.